Good morning. Could I have the members of the Government Management Committee in committee room number 1, please?
Attention, please. Would members of the Government Management Committee please report to Committee Room 1 for quorum? Thank you.
Can I please have the members of the Government Management Committee, if they can hear me, to committee room 1, please, to start the meeting? Good morning, everyone. I'm going to welcome everyone to meeting 21 of the Government Management Committee. I want to welcome members of the committee, to the other members of the council in attendance today, and to members of the public. For those in the room with us, there's a screen in the back corner providing real-time updates concerning where we are on the agenda and what's coming up next. And if you're following this meeting at home, you can, or at your business, you can follow the agenda and debate on your computer, tablet, or smartphone at www.toronto.ca/council. As the chair of the Government Management Committee, I'd also gratefully acknowledge it is meeting on the traditional territory of the Mississaugas, the Credit First Nation, the Haudenosaunee, the Huron-Wendat, and home to many diverse Indigenous peoples. Saying that, I would like to welcome everybody. First off, are there any declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? Seeing none, I need a motion to confirm the minutes of May 1st, 2017. Councillor Cole, all in favor? Carried. There's a speakers list in front of you. The one thing I am going to add to the speakers list, I am just going to move a motion that GMC 21.10 be considered at 10 a.m. We have 2 guest speakers for that. Presentation, sorry. All in favor? 21.10, the OMERS annual report. All in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Okay, our first item, 21.1, apportionment of property taxes, May 29th, 2017 hearing is timed for 9:45. Our second item is also timed for 9:45, the cancellation, reduction, or refund of property taxes as of May 29th, 2017 hearing. Our third item is 2016 consulting services expenditures for city divisions and major agencies and corporations.
I'd like to hold that, please.
Councillor Davis is holding number 3.
Thank you.
Number 4 is a write-off of uncollectible property taxes from the tax roll. We have a report from the treasurer. Anybody like to move the recommendation?
I'll move adoption.
Councillor Davis is moving adoption of the recommendation. All in favor? Carried. Number 5 is the Toronto Civic Employee Pension Plan Actuarial Valuation Report as at December 31st, 2016. We have a report and a recommendation from the treasurer. Councillor Crisanti is moving adoption. All in favor? Carried. Number 6 is the Metropolitan Toronto Pension Plan Actuarial Valuation Report as of December 31st, 2016. And there's a report from the treasurer and 3 recommendations. Anybody want to hold it?
I'll move adoption.
Councillor Davis is moving adoption of the recommendations. All in favor? Carried. Number 7, Metropolitan Toronto Police Benefit Fund Actuarial Valuation Report as of December 31st, 2016. There's a report from the treasurer and 4 recommendations. Anybody want to hold it or move it?
I'll move adoption.
Thank you. Councillor Davis is moving adoption. All in favor? Carried. Number 8 is the Toronto Fire Department Superannuation and Benefit Fund Actuarial Valuation Report as of December 31st, 2016. There's a report from the City Treasurer with 1 recommendation. Councillor Cole is moving that. All in favor? Carried. Number 9, progress on the merger of the City of Toronto Pre-OMERS pension plans. There's a report from the Treasurer to receive this for information. Councillor Crisanti is moving number 9. All in favor? Carried. Number 10 is presentation. I will hold that. Number 11, provision of SAP SuccessFactors proprietary software product for the SAP Canada for the city's enterprise-wide transformation project. Sure, actually, I'm going to hold that if nobody else wants to. Councillor Cole, you're going to hold it? Okay. Number 12, there's 1 deputant.
Oh, I was going to hold it, but
Yep, there's 1 deputant. Number 13, there's 6 deputants, I believe. So there's deputants for number 13.
Mr. Chair, if I could,
Councillor McConnell?
there's been a request that that item be last because there was a big discussion this morning somewhere else on living wage. So if we can hold it as the last deputant item. They
Okay.
asked to have it in the afternoon, but I don't think we'll go in the afternoon.
Okay.
See?
You'd like
That's
to
number
do 13 last?
Yeah.
Sorry, you want to do 13 last, or is the last? Okay, all right. Is everybody fine with that? Councillor Davis, are you fine with that? We're going to do number 13 last? Okay. Number 14 is the Union Station Revitalization Project Status Update. Councillor Coles holding number 14. Number 15, the expropriation of a permanent easement at 2388 Jane Street. We have a report from the Chief Corporate Officer.
move adoption.
Councillor Davis is moving adoption number 15. All in favor? Carried. Number 16 is the expropriation of a permanent easement at 685 Lansdowne Avenue, 699 Lansdowne Avenue, and 478 St. Clarens Avenue. There's a report from the Chief Corporate Officer with 2 recommendations. Councillor Crisanti is moving them. All in favor? Carried. Number 17, expropriation of the right-of-way easement interest in favor of 1480 Jane Street over parts of 55 Denison Road East. It's in Ward 11. A report from the Chief Corporate Officer.
Move adoption.
Councillor Davis is moving adoption. All in favor? Carried. Number 18, real estate acquisitions, TTC, Runnymede Station, Easier Access Project. There's a report from the Chief Corporate Officer with 2 recommendations. Councillor Cole is moving that. All in favor? Carried. Number 19, the redevelopment of the St. Lawrence Market North status update in Ward 28. Councillor McConnell, did you?
I'll move that, Mr. Chair, with just one comment, if I could.
Yep.
We discovered, as you know, a great deal of our artifacts, and we're in the process of trying to figure out how to get them out of the ground and store them. You saw that at council one round ago, but it looks like pretty exciting stuff that we found, and we may be able to show it off in a particular way. So expect that there'll be further either Section 37 coming forward or some corporate money to properly show it off once it's in the, once the building is built. So.
Okay, thank you very much.
I should also say that the tender will close on August the 1st, end of July, yeah.
Excellent. Okay. All in favor of the recommendations in number 19, moved by Councillor McConnell, carried. Number 20 is the award of tender call 1-2017- construction of Block 31, the Canoe Landing Community Center and Child Care Center and 2 elementary schools. This is in Ward 20. And there's a report from the General Manager, Children's Services, and the General Manager, Parks, Forestry and Recreation. Councillor Davis is moving adoption. All in favor? Carried. Number 21 is the amendment to purchase order number 604-1177 and 604-1005 for consulting services for the Block 31 Canoe Landing Community Center, Child Care Center, and 2 elementary schools. Councillor Crisanti is moving adoption of the recommendations. All in favor? Carried. Number 22 is the acquisition of 50 Richmond Street East in Ward 28. Councillor McConnell, did you want to move it?
I'll move the recommendation and just note that this is for their headquarters. Some said it was for another parking lot, but it is not.
Okay. All in favor of the recommendations in number 22? Moved by Councillor McConnell, carried. And number 23, the French Language Advisory Committee requests for updates on the Maison de la Francophonie de Toronto and a French language university in Toronto. Councillor Shan?
And move adoption of
I'd
that.
like to move adoption. Okay. All in favor? Councillor Shan's moving the recommendations. Carried. Okay, so we will go back to number 1, which is a public hearing on the apportionment of property taxes for as of May 29th, 2017. Is there anybody here that would like to speak on item number 1? Any speakers on item number 1? Going once, going twice, going 3 times. Okay. So I am going to move the following item, motion item number 1, the recommendation number 1 in the report of May 11, 2017 from the Treasurer be deleted and replaced with the following. The Government Management Committee approved the apportionment of property taxes in the amounts identified in Appendix A and B under the columns entitled Apportion Tax and Apportion Phase-In/Capping, excluding the following applications from Appendix B. Ward 23 in 2016, the property location is 289 Hounslow Avenue. The next one is Ward 36 in 2016, the property location 113 Sandown Avenue. The third one is in Ward 20 for 2016 at 208 Queens Quay West. The next one is in Ward 20, 2016 at 35 Mariner Terrace. The second last one is in Ward 26, 2016 tax year at 262 Beesboro Drive. And the last one is in Ward 30 for the 2016 year tax year at 345 to 349 Carlaw Avenue. Does anybody have any questions of the mover? I hope not. All in favor? Item is amended. All in favor? Carried. Which brings us to item number 2, the cancellation, reduction, or refund of property taxes of May 23rd, 2017 hearing. Is there anybody in the room that would like to speak to this item? Is there anybody that would like to speak to item number 2? Going once, going twice, 3 times. And we're all good. Somebody like to move the recommendations in the report? Councillor Cole, all in favor? Carried. Okay, we have 5 minutes. Does the committee want to deal with item number 12? There's one deputant on it. Sorry? Okay. Sorry, Councillor Davis?
The SCP is number 11.
Councillor 12 is not a quick item? Okay. Sorry, Councillor Cole? On 11? Okay. All right, so we will take care of item number 11 first. Councillor Cole, questions of staff?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair, to staff. This is always good news when we are migrating to SAP, sometimes fraught with some challenges. I guess my one question would be, how would you describe this in kind of on the spectrum of being customized versus off the shelf? And how much are we tailoring this for as a kind of a City of Toronto specific solution?
Maybe through Madam Chair, Mr. Chair, I'll just start. I am not a fan of ever customizing. We try to go configuration as much as possible, but in this particular instance, I'll let Lan or Fazal answer the question. But yeah, I share the question is about worrying about customization. I don't like customization either.
It is indeed.
Majority of the system is going to be as is we're not customizing any portion, or at least at this point, we're not planning on customizing any portion.
Good answer. And just one other question. At the TTC, we've begun SAP implementation. And as our CFO can tell you, there's always fun budget time when we're trying to make sure that our language kind of can speak to each other. Will it be similar systems and will kind of allow that kind of integration, not just with TTC, but across all ABCs eventually, as others on board?
Through you, Mr. Chair, absolutely. So we have other instances other than our own on SAP. The police are on SAP. TTC actually bought their licenses through the city. So actually, it will make transfer of financial information simpler.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Those are my questions, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions on item number 11?
I can move
Councillor Cole, do you want me to
I can move the staff
Right.
recommendations.
Councillor Cole's moving the staff recommendations in item number 11. All in favor? Carried. So then we will go back to we're going to go back to item number 10, the annual update on OMERS as it relates to the city's employer contributions. And we have two people here to make a presentation on item number 10. One of them is former city manager Joe Pinichetti.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. So I can't resist the budget must be in good shape. There's new chairs here.
Welcome back.
Thank you, Chair. I think most of you know that we were invited here last year, and it's an annual process now where the two your representatives on the OMERS board will be coming annually to give you an update as to where the OMERS plan is in general. I'll provide a very short overview on OMERS, basically related to membership and developments more strategically as to where we're at. And then David Beattie, who's your other OMERS board member.
Morning, David.
Walk through the financial annual report as to where we're at and the positive results that we had in 2016. So very quickly, I'll just do 5 or 6 quick slides that are more background. I think most of you are aware that OMERS has 2 boards. There's an administrative corporation, that slide there, and a sponsors corporation. David is your representative on the administrative corporation, and I'm your representative for the sponsors corporation on the right side. The administrative corporation, as you can see there, 15 board members, again, split between employee and employer sponsors. And there's more recently an independent board chair, which was a very positive step for that corporation. And Basically, that corporation is monitoring and representing all of us related to the day-to-day operations. So pension administration, investments, plan valuation, actuarial results, et cetera, are all vetted through and controlled through the AC board. On the sponsors corporation side, again, 14 members, 7 each. I should highlight that Tim Maguire, that you all know, and I think Tim may be presenting today on another issue, is on the SC board as well with me, but he's representing QP generally, not just the QP Toronto reps, but also QP generally. And in addition, we have Frank Romanano, that you, I'm sure, know, the Toronto firefighters head, who is on SC as well, but he's representing the Ontario firefighters. So you actually have, between an ex-person, myself, and 2 other union reps, if you will, and association reps that are on the SC board. So you have lots of representation on the SC corporation. And we have 2 co-chairs. One is from AMO, representing municipalities, and the other one is actually Frank, representing the firefighters. The SC board's main purpose is appointing all the board representatives, and of course the key role of SC is the contribution rate setting, the establishment of reserves, and most importantly, plan design. And I want to emphasize the bottom mission statement: to deliver secure, sustainable, affordable benefits for members and employers. And that has all been developed jointly between the 2 boards. The strategic plan that was just updated was a combination of work between both boards to ensure that we had one OMERS strategic plan. So that's background. Membership, about 470,000 members, 280,000 active, deferred, those that have been members and have opted out for usually a short period of time, possibly coming back, and then finally a large number retired. I want to emphasize part-time and full-time, 27%, 73%. City of Toronto actually has a slightly lower average number. We're about 21% part-time and close to 80% full-time. The other thing I want to highlight is Toronto membership, excluding the agencies, represents about 9% of the members in OMERS. But if you add the agencies, adds another 5-ish%, so about 14% of OMERS membership is City of Toronto employees. And that, of course, excludes TTC. I think most of you are aware TTC still have their own plan. As much as we want to try to have a merger there, there's a lot of difficulties that may come forward to committee in the future. The other thing I want to highlight too is, so there's 14% Toronto membership. When you do it on a contribution basis, and this is the work that was in your reports from staff, Toronto representatives or employees represent about 17% of contributions. So bottom line, City of Toronto is the largest group that is part of OMERS in terms of an employer per se. The membership 2016 highlights, we still are growing, albeit very slowly, about 2% membership growth when you take a net increase after joining or increased new members of about 18,000, but of course 9,000 retirees in 2016, so that you have a net gain of about 9,000, which represents a little bit more than 2% of our active membership. There were 13 new employers, but you'll see it's very small groups. It's 72 members only. These are very small agencies, usually as part of a municipality that weren't included, that now are part of OMERS. So very small in terms of that type of growth of those that have been excluded in the past. Funding, which is, David's going to be emphasizing this information and giving you a bit more history. I'll just say that we improved by 2% because of our large double-digit return last year that David will cover. We are now almost 94% funded as highlighted there, increased almost 2% in 2016, but we've increased about 8% in the last 4 years. So we're doing very well. The strategic plan says that we want to be 100% funded by 2025. The way it's going, we should be at 100% before 2025. In terms of our issues going forward, and this has been highlighted to committee in the past, and this is happening not just for OMERS, but for employment across the board, private or public sector. The ratio of active members to retired members continues to drop as we age as a population and demographics and retire. We are down now to 1.9 to 1, meaning roughly 2 to 1 active to retired, which you saw in the previous chart. The scary part is in 10 years, we will be down to about 1.4 to 1, and in 20 years, very close to 1 to 1. And that is a lot of what we as board members are looking to deal with and work on into the future. Finally, for my side, new 2017 developments and from this stakeholders corporations viewpoint, strategic issues, these are probably the 2 key ones. Excuse me, Chair. The comprehensive workforce research. Because we're trending down in terms of active members, we are looking at how do we possibly grow our membership. And we want to sit back and look at what the future trends are. So we just recently, the board just recently hired a consultant to do an analysis for us. We hope to have a report early next year. Bottom line is we're looking for how can we, first of all, look at the trends, what's happening into the future, not just 1 year, but 5 and 10 years out, and what can we do in the short term possibly to alleviate some of our pressures. And one of the key areas there is looking at the non-full-time workers and part-time membership. We've already started discussions between OMERS staff and city staff to see what potential there is there in terms of trying to grow our part-time membership. If you're not aware, there are part-time members that are eligible to join OMERS and for one reason or another often don't decide to join OMERS. And we're working together to try to get as many members as possible to join. And then finally, closed plans. You just received the report from the CFO, treasurer, and staff on the closed plans. As you're all well aware, especially the chair, we've been working for a number of years on this, trying to consolidate the old closed plans with OMERS. I'll just say that as outlined in the staff report, we agree with the comments that it's very close. I hope that we can come to an agreement in the summer, fall, and you'll have something coming back to committee later this year. With that quick background, I'll turn it to Mr. Beattie now to cover the financial aspects of the annual report.
Thank you very much, committee members, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here to report on the results in 2016. It was a very good, solid year. We had a plus 10% return and an improved funded ratio. The highlights you can see up on the screens: 10.3% net assets of 85 billion. That number is now 88, and an improved funded ratio that we'll discuss further. It should be noted that the funded ratio is smoothed over 5 years in a prudent manner, and there is a more conservative discount rate. So you see a number on the right which says 3.4 billion or 3.9% in unrealized or unrecognized investment gains. That would improve the funded ratio through 97%. So the fund is in a good position at this point. When we take a look at the comparison to last year, that deficit has reduced, as Joe commented. It's a combination of investment returns, contributions, and then the negative is we took a more conservative approach to the discount rate and inflation. This shows you those discount rates and inflation assumptions. Inflation generally has been trending downwards, and we've taken a more prudent real discount rate. On the investment returns, this was the good news for OMERS this year. Our target benchmark was 7.9%. We achieved 10.3%, and this was meaningfully better by about a third compared to last year at 6.7. Pleased to say that OMERS was basically firing on all cylinders, so both the public assets, private equity, infrastructure, and real estate. Last year, the same sort of thing, but even stronger performance you can see from public assets and real estate. Over the next page, you'll see a highly diversified asset mix. OMERS was early to the game in terms of investing in infrastructure, in real estate through the creation of Oxford Properties, and in private equity. It accounts for about 45% of our assets and has provided very good returns over the last 4 or 5 years. About 55% of our assets are public investments. These include public stocks, credit, and various types of government bonds. Finally, the goal, as Joe indicated, is to be fully funded by 2025, to have stable contributions and benefits, and to prudently have sufficient liquidity to pay the pensions and keep the pension promise, as we say around OMERS. With that, I'd like to open it to questions to either Joe or myself, and we'd be pleased to address anything. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. Questions for the deputants? Any? Councillor Davis?
We have, and I'm going to talk about this later too. Joe, you were talking about hiring consultants to look at future trends around part-time, but we also have a lot of temporary workers. Now, I think that temporary workers do have the ability to contribute, but is there that precarious work issue is one of the trends, and I'm wondering if you've contemplated how to address pensions for people who are precariously employed.
Through you, Mr. Chair. First of all, Councillor, it's not just a review of the non-full-time, but that's a major aspect of it. So it's a outlook 5-10 years and beyond as to where employment is headed within our public sector, generally. But of course, we know that that's going to include a lot of analysis as to where things are headed for part-time, non-full-time staff. You're correct. There are so many classes, as you know, even within the City of Toronto, temporary, part-time. You know, we probably have 7 or 8, 10 different classifications here, and all the municipalities and school boards that are representative in OMERS, similar type of breakdown. And temporary can be part of that as well. It comes down to, the employer deciding as well, partly who is eligible. And on the OMERS side, what we're going to do is look at how broad do we as a board say it should be open. And right now, at this stage, it is pretty wide open for Toronto to have all the part-timers part of it. So the bottom line is most of the employees, there's a limit on number of hours that the mics can explain. I forget the exact number, but there's a limit on the number of hours to meet call it temporary / part-time minimum requirements to be part of the pension plan. But that's all the type of information we're going to be looking at, and we're going to be having a report that would be for all OMERS employers. But of course, we would then want to work with the city and city staff as to how can we maximize and grow the membership in the City of Toronto based on what we've seen in this forecast and this analysis from the consultants.
What are the other trends you're looking at?
Sorry?
You said the part-time, temporary, whatever, that is one of the trends. What else are you looking at?
That's the main, it is the main thing.
Okay.
But also, what are the types of full-time employment? Are they, shifting the full-time membership within an employer. Across municipalities, there's variations. City of Toronto, full-time is higher than municipalities outside of the GTA often have a higher mix of part-time and full-time. It's that type of analysis.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Davis. Other questions? No, seeing none. So I just had a few. Councillor, you had another one? Go ahead.
I'm sure you have an investment policy that addresses ethical investments. Could you just describe to us the core of your ethical investments policy?
I think on the precise details of that, I might ask Jonathan. Do you have Jonathan Simmons is the Chief Financial Officer of OMERS, and he'll address that.
There we go. I'm on. Good. Good morning, everyone. So at OMERS, our approach to this topic is really enshrined in two of our core and foundational documents. One is our Statement of Investment Beliefs, which talks about our approach to investing very broadly. And the other is in our Statement of Investment Policies and Procedures, which is a more operational document that talks about how and where and when we invest. Our approach to this topic is set out also in our sustainability statement, which touches on the topic of ESG. We believe that as a fiduciary, well-managed companies that are able to respect environmental, social, and good governance principles actually over the long term will generate the best returns for the pension plan. And so with that fundamental belief, it's our approach to the topic of ESG which really drives all of our investment professionals in the way they make decisions. So that's very important to us that we have that as a fundamental component of all of our investment decisions.
And how do you measure your achievement of those objectives?
That's not an easy area to invest. But if I think about part of our business like Oxford Properties, so 15% of our fund approximately is invested in our real estate company, Oxford. That company has set very specific targets around some of the environmental impact that organization has. So in terms of energy use, in terms of water use. And so those kind of areas are easier to measure because one can be quite objective in measuring those topics, because you can read energy meters and you can calculate the amount of water being used on projects. Across the portfolio, some of those areas are much more difficult to assess, especially when you get out there into the world of investing in public equities. And in public equities, our approach is to be very direct. Although we're a large fund, in the grand scheme of things, we don't own significant portions of any company. But when our investment teams are keeping close to the investments in which we have a dialogue with the CEO, the CFO of those companies, and we engage with them on discussions about how they are approaching this topic of their business. And that's important to us.
If you could send me anything about how you measure your ESG achievables, that would be great.
Very happy to do that.
And on Oxford Properties, we've just spent 3 years and then voted down, unfortunately, a stormwater management charge and an approach to malls, parking lots, et cetera, to ensure that there is stormwater management and permeability to help address our stormwater objectives. Is Oxford taking any initiatives, do you know, around stormwater containment, stormwater management?
Certainly we are. So I actually met with one of my colleagues just last week and got an update on this topic. So you mentioned permeability. So permeability of parking lots is something which is increasingly important, and people are recognizing that, and we're moving ahead in that respect. Cisterns and catch basins to temporarily catch runoff is something that we have been including in our designs. Some of our assets are legacy assets, and so one has to make sure that one future-proofs and renovates, and both of those things are in our plans.
Good. For instance, Green P has a multi-year plan to not just make sure that they meet the green standards for their future parking lots, but they're going back and retrofitting all of their existing over a period of time to make sure they meet our green development and green parking lot standards. So I'd love to know if those are the standards that you're working to achieve at Oxford.
Happy to brief you.
Great, thanks.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'll just add, Councillor, as well, the stakeholder corporation, which I'm on, also keeps an eye on this issue, and only in the year and a half that I've been there, it's already been discussed a few times. So, excuse me, it's top of mind for both boards.
The environmental plan?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Other questions of the deputants? Nope. So I just had a few I wanted to ask. So if I look at this slide deck that you were showing us, so would you consider one of the biggest issues, Joe, you were talking about the ratio of slide 7? Thanks, Rob. Would that be one of your largest concerns as representing the City of Toronto and OMERS? That's the demographics.
I think all of us at the table here would agree that the aging population for all pension plans, but in particular for our defined plans, it's an issue. And it's something that is top of mind every year we're looking at. And quite frankly, part of our review to look at the future workplace is related to this issue. If we're all aging, we're going to have this number continue to drop. How can we have other growth to offset this retirement number that will not stop? It will continue. So we're looking at other areas that can possibly grow our OMERS membership to offset this reduction. Because, of course, as soon as we get close to 1-to-1, you have any kind of economic downturn, and we have significant issues. So.
And I think you said that you are forecast, or OMERS is forecast, that by 2030, you'll see the ratio 1-to-1-to-1?
I think 35-ish, it'll be close to that.
Okay, all right. Which leads to my next question, when you talk about investments and how to maximize the portfolio, and some of the reading that I've been doing. So the OMERS has its investments basically divided between public investment and private investment, and it's almost evenly split, public at 55% and private at 45%. Do they both get about the same rate of return in investment, or are you moving towards one versus the other for specific reason?
I think David can give a high-level overview of this slide.
Just,
16,
the best one is with returns.
slide 16, I think, here, right? Breaks out the...
Yes, please.
Oh, okay.
So David can start, and Jonathan might add as well.
Generally, the split between public and private assets has been about that 45% private, 55% public for the last 4.5 years that I've been on the board. As you can see, the returns in the public assets are slightly less than the private assets, and that's principally a liquidity premium, because you can either sell the bonds or the stocks fairly easily in public markets that certainly Toronto, New York, London are quite deep. There is a lower rate of return you would expect from that. The private equity infrastructure and real estate assets is a combination of about 4 to 5% current running yield, and then various gains that are achieved. There are very clearly set goals and objectives for the split amongst these 4 asset categories. It's monitored at every board meeting, so 5 or 6 times a year we see, and it's very carefully kept track of, but we're well within and right on target in terms of what assets we'd like to hold right now. Jonathan?
Yeah, the only thing I would add is we spend as much time talking about risk as we do return, because it's not just the return in isolation, which is important, it's the risk of those returns and the volatility around them. So if you look on the chart that you have, you'll also see that there's a difference not only in the achieved returns, but also in the benchmarks. The higher benchmark that you see for infrastructure really reflects the liquidity premium that David has mentioned. But it's really important that we all stay focused on both sides of that coin, and there's quite a lot of risk out there in markets today.
Yeah, and so I guess, which leads to my next question. So your investment portfolio is pretty much roughly divided between Canada and the United States, and you have a bit outside of North America. Is your plan or vision looking at emerging markets outside of North America?
This is an active topic of discussion within OMERS. Like a number of our peers, we are looking at Asia and the developing markets in Asia. A recent initiative is inclined to open a small representative office in Singapore to monitor more closely those markets. We have a substantial presence in Australia and a number of assets there. It's a Commonwealth nation, very good laws, very highly developed infrastructure and investment regime with very good partners. So we also did our first investment in Chile in South America. Chile, as you know, is the most highly rated, most sophisticated South American market. It's a utility natural gas business that we own a portion of. And it's going very well. So we are very prudently and carefully, given our funded status, approaching these different markets.
Okay, and just my last question, I just wanted to, there was an article in the paper on the weekend about OMERS investing in the ETF industry or ETF industry. Could you explain briefly what that is, or is?
Sure, it's a comparatively small investment. We have in our platform investments, OMERS Ventures. It's about an $800 million investment. So to give you a frame of reference, 800 million on 88 billion is less than 1%. Within that portfolio, there's been a modest minority interest taken in a company called Purpose Investments. It's a highly sophisticated group that came out of Claymore ETFs with a great track record. ETFs are basically very low-cost ways to buy indices and stocks, and it was determined by the investment team at OMERS Ventures that this would be favorable. If you've traveled on Air Canada at all, you can't get away from the ad. It comes on the second you try to watch a movie. So it's a very sophisticated, successful group. The guy had a background at Royal Bank and then sold his business called Claymore ETFs. It was determined by the asset management team, which has some financial technology investments, that this was appropriate to the portfolio. It was not of a scale such that it came anywhere near the board or the investment committee that I sit on.
Okay, all right. Thank you, gentlemen. Is there any speakers on this item? No? Vince?
Sneak in one more question.
Sure, you want to sneak in a question? We can do that.
Yeah, sorry, this is just of clarification on page 4. I'm just trying to understand the terminology. So there's a total of 470,000 members, 280,000 of which are active. What's a deferred member? You're either a member or you're not. How do you defer members? Who are they?
I'll start. Through you, Mr. Chair, deferred member counselor is someone that may have started with the City of Toronto, worked here for 5 or 10 years, went back into the private sector, but is holding their pensionable earnings with OMERS, and we refer to it as a deferred position. I agree with your comment on the question, because when I saw it, I was surprised how big it was. I didn't realize there were so many. But that's basically what it is. I believe, grows annually or is fairly stable, but it is growing, not shrinking, I believe. Jonathan, is
Is
there?
it? Yeah.
The number is growing.
The deferred number is growing. The average age of retired is 71. Isn't the cutoff to contribute 65? Or has that changed?
That's correct, yes, Councillor.
65?
Yes.
And, okay, so I was just surprised that it was actually that high.
You want to add anything more?
Is it,
This is Warren Bell, who heads up operations for OMERS,
hi, good morning.
Chief Operating Officer.
Good morning. So 71 is the average age of a retired member. Our average member retires at age 62, and the average of those who are retired are 71 years old.
Okay. No, that's fine. It's just the way it gets reported out. I find it a bit confusing. We have 470,000 members. 43,000 or maybe much higher than that are deferred, so I'm not sure if that number should even be part of the total. So,
I think the key thing, Councillor, is that they are still technically members with OMERS, and many of them come back. So you'll have someone go out for 5 or 10 years in the private sector and do come back, and that's starting to happen on a regular basis. I saw it a lot in my 15 years here, where we had employees that were here, left, and came back, returned within 15 years.
they're a member even though they're not contributing? As a deferred member, you're not contributing?
No, while they're in the private sector, they're with another plan or whatever, but they're holding on to their previous public sector, City of Toronto time, because they haven't decided where they're going to finish, presumably, private sector or back in the public sector. And what I'm saying is, while it's growing, there are numbers of people that still, employees that come back to the public sector, oftentimes later in life.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Crisanti. I think that's it for questions. Speakers? Nope, okay. I just have one motion, so I'm going to speak. Sorry, Councillor David.
The first half of the year has been good. We had a good first quarter and a major real estate profit in London, England, with the sale of Leadenhall Building. Made a $500 million profit. So the returns are tracking very well so far, touch wood, in the first 5 months or so of the year. So again, all 4 cylinders firing nicely. But thank you.
Thank you. Did you want to speak, Janet, or sorry, Councillor Davis?
About real estate, do you see real estate cooling, and how are you preparing for that?
So we are a global real estate investor. As I said, about 15% of the fund is invested in real estate, and we've almost got half of that now invested offshore. So there's a lot of risk out there in lots of sectors of investing, not just in real estate, but also in public equity prices, and frankly also in government bonds as interest rates begin to rise. And our approach to that is quite straightforward. We buy the best quality assets because we believe that if we focus on quality assets, they are the most defensible in a situation where there is a cooling off. So we buy the best quality assets. We relentlessly focus on diversification because we believe that it's impossible to call it perfectly. Therefore, by staying diversified, you have the best hedge against that risk. And finally, keeping liquid, so that if markets do turn against us, we never want to be forced to sell into a down market. Actually, what we want to be able to do is buy in a down market. So quality, diversity, and liquidity are the 3 fundamental principles that we apply to our investment approach.
We would also have a very small exposure to residential. If your concern was in that regard, So it's principally a commercial and retail portfolio. And then, as Jonathan said, highly diversified across major capitals, you know, New York, Boston, Washington, London, small amount in Paris, which has worked out well with the election, and about half in Canada, spread across Canada. And with the retail malls, specifically the very large, high-quality malls such as Yorkdale, Square One, and Scarborough Town Centre.
Did you want to speak? Nope. Anybody to speak? Nope. Okay. I have a motion I'm going to move that City Council receive this report for information. I want to thank all the gentlemen for coming in this morning and giving us your annual update on OMERS. I originally asked for this as the Chair of Government Management because it was outlined in the report. OMERS has a substantial investments across North America and emerging economies around the world. I think it's important that everybody understands that when you look at the membership of OMERS, that our employees and including city councilors make up close to 15% of the membership of OMERS. I want to thank both of our representatives for all the work that they're doing. I know there's been some issues that they outlined in this report, but I think when you look at the OMERS in total, almost over 93, I think it was 93.4% fully funded and on track towards a target of 100% fully funded. I think that, that's a really great news story. Just some of the reading I've been doing about, assets, that OMERS has total assets of $85.2 billion as of the end of last year, which grew by $8 billion. So I want to thank both gentlemen that are our representatives on those two boards, sub-boards of OMERS, for all the work you're doing. And thank you for coming in this morning, and looking forward to hearing your presentation next year. Thank you very much. And a motion to receive for information. All in favor? Carried. Okay, our next item. Where did Councillor Davis go? Sorry, Councillor Davis, you're up next. We're going to number 3. We agreed to do number 13 last. We're on number 3, Councillor Davis, 2016 consulting services expenditures. You held that?
I think that I would ask Mr. Rossini.
Mr. Rossini, you're up.
I'm not sure who's on
We're on number
this
3,
report.
consulting services.
It's the treasurer, Mike. Anyway, I guess the obvious question is, our investments, or our spending on consultants are up 60% compared to last year. And I'm trying to understand I started going through every single appendix, and I didn't finish. So could you just explain overall where the largest increases were? Some of them are, like 70% more in R&D and legal and technical and management. I circled as the top increases over last year. Could you just explain why? Because I know the city manager identified this as well in his discussion on the budget, that there was concern about our increased spending on consultants.
I'll just start with a general comment. Well, yeah, 66% sounds huge. It is $1.2 million, so.
It was, sorry?
It's sorry, what's the difference there? About on the bottom of page 5.
When I was first elected, we were spending $3 million on
It's a big percentage, but it's a
And we're now up
smaller
to-
dollar amount. That's all I'm saying.
We're spending 10 times more than when I was first elected on consultants. I don't know whether it's because we lack staffing, is it we have increased technical needs, or there's certain work that's we're spending more on consultants for?
Through the chair, I believe a lot of the consulting has to do with transformation that we're undergoing. I can give a quick overview. Operating expenditures by city divisions are up 1.3 million, with the solid waste recycling program study for 0.4 million. Transportation, review of construction services procurement for 0.6 million. City manager's office, revenue tools and asset optimization studies for 0.3 million. Operating expenditures, agencies and corporations. The TTC has spent 800,000 on functional reviews of its service delivery groups. Sony Center has partnered in development studies for 0.1 million. and
Mike, are
police
you reading
services-
from a particular page in the report?
No, I'm just providing an overview.
Oh, okay.
Toronto Police by 0.1 million. On capital, city divisions decreased by 0.3 million, and agencies and corporations are up by 9.9, with the majority of that TTC.
Okay. So these are one-time projects? Is there a kind of a set budget for consulting and you operate within it, or it comes out of non-program and it just fluctuates year to year?
It depends, through Mr. Chair. So there is a small non-program budget for consulting, but many divisions will have some small budgets related to consulting. So if you look on the operating side, on page 5, the total budget is about 5.6 million. Bottom of page 5. That's on the operating.
On city divisions? Right, but it's 32 million for overall operating and capital.
The bulk of it does occur on capital. And just looking for that title, that is page, top of page 10, table 2A. It starts on page 9 and goes to the top of page 10. So the capital is about $26 million.
So I guess my question still is there a policy, a budget amount, how does the use of legal, for instance, has had a big increase. We hired a bunch of new lawyers. I don't know, are there policies for when divisions use consultants? Maybe I'll just ask that.
It would vary. So, for example, in legal, there's, I don't think there's anybody from legal here, but there are certain practices that they do, certain types of law that they will tend to go out on. For example, the largest that I can think of would be insurance claims. While we have been shifting some work in-house with the addition of, I think we added 3 lawyers over the last 2 budget cycles, there is a lot of that work is outsourced. So it'll vary by division, by program, by type of function that's done. And as you said, most of it is in the capital side, and it would be for consulting engineers and that sort, maybe project management services. So it'll vary by project and by division.
Is there any corporate oversight or policies or around this?
All procurements have to, sorry, through you, Mr. Chair, all procurements have to go through and be consistent with our procurement bylaw, and I think Michael is here and he can add some more details about that.
No, I understand the procure. I'm just trying to understand, is there an overall policy around when and how consultants are used, and whether, because it continues to rise in terms of cost, and it's not just cost, are there, just like with IT, we found that each division was doing different things and duplicating efforts, and we tried to sort of centralize and provide more central oversight on IT, so I'm just wondering if there's such a thing.
But generally,
Consulting.
Generally, through you, Mr. Chair, I don't think there's a policy because the city is so big and diverse. Where we tend to use consultants is where there is an infrequent use of a specific skill set. So, for example, I know on some of our IT projects where we have to do something, say, in SAP or something that we don't do frequently, but we have to access the market for. So you'll get that in specific types of IT software applications where it may not pay for us to hold somebody internally, and we have to typically access the market and consultants for that. So it's
I've
very
noticed,
much, I mean,
for
in a city this
instance-
big, it varies.
I've noticed, for instance, that we're using KPMG, Deloitte, far more than we used to. Are there blanket contracts now? We're also doing some polling. We're doing polling on many, many things. We didn't used to do polling, so we've got polling consultants somewhere. Is that a blanket contract? Like how, I've noticed surveys, a bunch of surveys, like are there blanket contracts around consultants, and how do divisions access those? Is that a trend that we're seeing?
All right, Councillor, that's your last question.
So through the chair, with respect to polling, there was a contract in place with Ipsos Reid, which we're now trying to look at a different way moving forward with respect to polling. I'm not sure if polling falls under the consulting service expenditures. With respect to consulting, most of the time, the division will come to purchasing and we'll do a call for consulting. There was back in, when we were doing the service reviews, there was a roster at that time.
Yes.
We don't have a roster at the moment for consultants, so divisions are going through a procurement process as it comes up.
Okay, so
Thank you. Sorry, Councillor, you're at.
So I think I got my answers, but not really.
Okay, thank you. Other questions of staff on this item? Councillor Crisanti?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Maybe I'll ask some questions that Councillor Davison had the opportunity to, and they were very good questions. So my concern is very similar. We're at $32 million in consulting services for 2016, and I think the increase is significant, 60% increase over 2015. But then I heard that the increase is 66%. So can you clarify, why does it say 59% on the front page of the report, page 1? On page 5, as the Deputy City Manager indicated, it is 66%.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So on page 1, that is the total of operating capital, almost $32 million, and it's up 59%. Table on page 5 is just operating only, and then if you flip onto page 9, it does capital. So we provided detailed breakdowns for the total operating capital and then separately.
And I also heard that there's no policy or criteria as to when we go out. I would suspect we have a lot of good talent in the city. Why aren't we doing more of this in-house, and can we do more in-house?
So let's just put this a bit into perspective. So on the operating side, we use consultants actually very infrequently. We spend about $12.5 billion a year, and we've spent, of that $12.5 billion, $5.7 million in the operating side. It's a very small amount. So it's mostly done on the project side, as you said, on capital. It's 26 million of the 31 million in total. And when you look at it in total, we spend almost $16 billion a year, of which 31's in consulting. So it just, a little relative balance and perspective is important. So we really actually use it as a total, very infrequently, and as I said in the past, it's where we use a specialized type of resources that are needed that we don't typically house in-house. And one of the reasons for the increases this year, as Mike pointed out, we were doing a lot of new transformational things, whether it's like the real estate review or our major IT transformational projects like the purchasing transformation, and there's some others that we're doing. That would account for the increase. But as a relative share of our total spending, it's actually quite small.
As small as it is, it's still $26 million on the capital side, which you indicated is the highest expenditures on the capital side, and I understand the need for it, but is there any way of reviewing this, maybe looking at doing more in-house, or could this be dealt with in-house for the most part?
I think each program delivers its capital program. They look at what resources are needed to deliver the capital program, and it's typically a mix of in-house resources and consulting. I trust the judgment of our divisions that they do look at that. I think it is generally, we use our city resources first, and where we cannot, then we go outside. But even on the capital, so $26 million on our capital program is in excess of $3 billion, $3.5 billion, so that's under 1% of capital spending.
Okay, probably not going to move a motion, but I'm still concerned about 26 million is more than 1% of our tax base if we were to measure it that way, and there's a lot we can do with that kind of money in other areas of the city. So I would just caution that we watch that number carefully going forward. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sorry, did you have a question on that? Sorry, Vince, was that Councillor Croissant? Yeah. All right. Okay, I saw Councillor Shan next, Councillor Cole, and then Councillor McConnell. Councillor Shan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a few questions based on page number 5. Just looking at, though the amount, relatively speaking, is smaller or small, the percentage variance is of significance, I'm assuming, like in terms of what happened between last year and this year, or what happened even between budget and this year. Like, so for example, the legal was only about 3% of the consulting fee, but last year it became 20% of the consulting fee. If you budgeted, for example, management to be around 1.5, and we got to 2.3, which is about almost 44% difference or something like that, which is which is significant variance. So is there particular reasons? I mean, if there are public reasons, if not public reasons, then we can defer it. But I want to know if there has been particular, that's why going back to Councillor Janet Davis' question about guiding principles or frameworks as to when we decide whether we go over or under would be helpful. Are there any framework that helps guide it? I know it cannot be specific because each division is different, but is there anything that is general that guides the consulting processes as a document?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we can talk about the specifics about why legal has increased. I'm just consulting with Dara from legal. It's probably best if we go in camera if you want to discuss the specifics about the legal increase.
Yeah. So going to the other part of the question is there any frame? I know each division is different and their needs are going to be unique depending on the year they are in. But is there general guidelines or frameworks of consultant use? Like you mentioned something about this is for specific type of functions that are not ongoing, or so is there anything that we have as a policy or that says, this is when city would engage in consultations and what would we be following?
Through the chair, in relation to the question, if this helps, in relation to the question with respect to legal expenditures, typically, the decision to retain outside counsel arises on a project-by-project basis because there's an identification that we don't have a skill set in-house in our legal services division to assist in addressing a specific legal question that's arisen. So rather than maintain an in-house lawyer to practice in an area that only comes up quite rarely in our experience, we'll go to outside counsel. Because those services can be quite specialized, the specialization comes with an expense. So it doesn't take a lot of special projects where you're requiring a specialized skill set from an external lawyer for the cost to increase significantly. That can, without getting into the specifics of these matters, that can give rise to those one-time expenditures that look like the high watermark, and they are a high watermark to the extent that they arise infrequently and as a one-off, if that helps.
I think I'm clear with the reason for it. I'm just wondering if there's like a checklist or a framework that exists within the city for not just legal department, but research and development or management that we can look at to kind of match to see, was this a necessary consultant position or not, and how is that governed overall in terms of, and then the next question is there a framework? I heard there was a kind of a list of consultants we had previously that we go to now that has gone down, and now we go with whoever we can. Each department finds the person. So I'm just trying to find a process that can be a little bit more.
Actually, Rob, I can handle that. Through the chair, there is a consultants hiring policy that Purchasing and Materials Management has that references that the city should only utilize consulting services when staff are fully occupied, special projects require certain technical capabilities, the advice or services sought and the resulting expenditure can be justified as being necessary to satisfy program requirements, independent expertise is required by legislation or regulation, council has directed the use of external assistance, and/or priority capital projects require greater resources than the city has available. So that there is a policy that Purchasing and Materials Management, which is involved in these situations and even in approving sole source requirements, ensures is undertaken.
Thank you.
Questions? Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. The first thing that struck me was obviously the percentage increase, but then as I dove deeper, it appeared that a lot of the larger dollar items were as a result of council-directed initiatives. An example being the capital review at the TTC, then we have to bring in KPMG to do that. How many of those kind of items that we see in that list, I don't need a specific number, are actually the result of policy initiatives or council mandates to do work that's beyond the scope or capability of city staff?
Through the chair, I don't believe we've categorized it that way, but certainly we can in the future.
Okay. The real estate review. The real estate review, yeah. Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Councillor McConnell, questions?
Yes, thank you. Well, I too looked at it and thought, wow, it has grown, and then I started to think about my own ward. And so if you look at the list, you'll see a lot of environmental assessments that are being done by outside consultants, and I would think, in terms of my question, that would be a very expensive proposition to have a full office who would do those sorts of assessments. Is that correct?
Yes, basically, as I've said in the past, yes.
Yes.
I would agree with that.
And in terms of the historical aspect, both in terms of the North Market, which we've talked about, but also the very specific lighting programs that are going on with heritage lighting. So even though in, for example, Union Station, we have an expert in planning and in heritage, you still need to have those kinds of specialized people, and that would certainly not be somebody you would want to retain on staff. Is that right?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I would agree with that as well, yes.
And the head lease at the same place, we would be a similar sort of thing. We're not really in the head lease business, are we?
Not to the extent that's contemplated, where basically you're running, 100, 150,000 square foot mall. So that's why we,
right.
Osmington.
Or where you're building one swimming pool a year and you need an architect who has some expertise. Is that correct?
Yes, and in most cases, we don't build one a year. We'll build one over several years. That's right.
That's right. Okay. So those are really my questions.
Okay, thank you, Councillor McConnell. I just had one question I wanted to ask about the report. Is there any way that we could have a chart or a slide deck that quantifies the amount that are saved or the monies that would have been used otherwise if we hadn't hired a consultant?
I guess we could, that's a difficult question to answer. So if I'm understanding the question is,
So I'm just saying, so we hired a
instead of having the
lawyer.
resources in-house all the time?
Yeah,
We could think about that. I'm not sure how we would handle that, but I guess so.
Certainly, we can consider something like that for the future, although sometimes we can outline how much was at risk. Savings certainly, unless we set out for how we're going to capture them, would be difficult.
right. I'm just saying, because some of my colleagues will say, you spend $3 million on consultants, it seems to be going up, or, was there a rationale for saving them? It was a small project in whatever area. We otherwise would have to hire somebody full-time.
Pam suggested we hire a consultant to do that work.
There we go. Okay, thank you. Councillor Davis, you held this item. Did you want to speak?
Well, it certainly, the use of the percentages captures your attention in this report, and the combination of operating capital tends to give you a sense of a much larger amount in terms of increases. I see that the policy was approved in 2001, and I'm glad you explained it at the end, what the criteria were. I'm not sure that it's purchasing who should be applying the policy, but it might be useful at some point to revisit that and to see whether or not there's any changes that might be required, but I'm not going to move a policy today. Otherwise, maybe it's true what Councillor Cole said, we need another consultant. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Davis. Any other speakers on this? No, Councillor Davis, sorry, did you move the?
I'll move the staff recommendation.
Okay, all in favor of receiving this report for information? Carried. And our next item, sorry, I lost my sheet. We're on item number 12. Award of request for proposals number 211-16-3160 to BSM Technologies Limited for the provision of telematics solutions. We have one speaker, Matt Filiano, Executive Vice President, Canadian Union of Public Employees, Local 416. Morning, sir. You have 5 minutes to speak whenever you're ready. At the end of the 5 minutes, each councillor can ask you questions for up to 5 minutes, and then we have the next portion after that. We can ask questions of staff on this item, and then we'll debate it after that. So you have 5 minutes whenever you're ready.
There it is. Good morning. My name is Matt Filiano. I'm the Executive Vice President of QP Local 416. I'm here with my colleague, Brian Demorowski. He's the representative of the Solid Waste Division. I'm here today on behalf of the city solid waste employees and the rest of the local to speak about the implementation of in-cab employee surveillance cameras in all of our city solid waste collection vehicles. The report before you notes safety as the primary reason for wanting to install these surveillance cameras. And yet, in this entire 12-page report, the word safety is mentioned only in very generic and redundant terms. This report does not describe how. It doesn't justify the need. It doesn't provide the basis for this recommendation. There is no mention of the city's CVOR ratings and how that compares to the private sector CVOR ratings or other jurisdictions. And if the staff believes that these cameras will truly save lives, why is the recommendation to install in-cab cameras for public waste collection vehicles only? What about the private sector waste collection vehicles? And where is the policy discussion at council that directed staff to pursue the installation of these in-cab cameras? Who sees the video surveillance data? Where is it stored, and for how long? None of these questions have been asked or answered. According to the Solid Waste Division, a pilot project was implemented in 2014 for these in-cab cameras. Has it been completed? If yes, what are the results? Where is the cost-benefit analysis? This report states that while these benefits cannot be quantified at this time, any savings as a result of telematics will be included in future years' budget submissions. So staff suggesting taxpayers spend $15 million for these telematic solutions without evidence that there will be any savings or improvement to safety. Local 416 is committed to adopting measures that improve safety. No driver would want to jeopardize their life or that of anyone else purposely driving dangerously. This report is not about safety, but uses safety as an excuse to install spy cams. Surveillance cameras will not prevent accidents or fatalities. Local 416 recommends that the monies instead be allocated towards programs and services to actually mitigate these collisions and have the real potential to save lives. If safety is really the motive behind this recommendation, these monies would be much better spent on investing in the driver. For example, currently, defensive driving training is provided to drivers only after they have been involved in 2 collisions or accidents. Why not provide defensive driving training for all drivers so that we can prevent accidents from happening? The camera that spies on drivers will not be able to do a better job than defensive driver training. This report really begs the question, what is staff's real motive? On behalf of the City of Solid Waste workers, I am asking that the recommendation to purchase and install in-cab cameras on solid waste trucks be removed from this report and that the funds be relocated to areas where it truly promotes safety and mitigate risk. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. There are questions to the deputy SI councillors. Councillor Karygiannis.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to the deputant, thank you very much for coming down this morning. Really appreciate some of the comments that you made. You mentioned something about there was a pilot project that was done.
Correct.
Do you know where this? I mean, this says District 4. I'm looking at. Was this installed? How many trucks are there in District 4 of sanitation?
There's about 120 vehicles. So the pilot project, and I'm getting this information from the City of Toronto website, it states that in 2014 there was a pilot project.
Okay, but none of your drivers, through the chair, have told you anything about this pilot project?
Nothing.
None of the people that you represent have come to you and say there's a pilot project up there that you know of?
Absolutely not.
So if none of them have told you, then if this, what it says here, is correct, that means they might have been installed without the workers knowing.
Possibly. Possibly, I'm not sure.
Through you to, through the chair to the deputant, has the city ever approached you and told you that they were going to, there's a pilot project that's being done?
In 2014 or?
The website says this pilot commenced in 2014 and will be completed in 2015. I'm looking at 4.2.
Correct.
Had they approached you and said that they were doing this back in 2014, 15?
So to answer the question, honestly and truthfully, I wasn't around with the union in 2014. So it might have with the old executives. I don't know that.
Okay, the gentleman sitting beside you, is he part of the new executive or was he?
He's actually the representative of the Solid Waste Division.
Well, may I, through the chair, ask you, sir, did they approach you or do you know of any, they approached anybody?
Yeah, keep in mind, turn this on. Keep in mind, I became chair in 2016, so somebody before then, I haven't seen them.
But you were working out in the trucks before that? Did you, I mean, in the...
I haven't seen anything inside a truck that's an in-camera.
Through the chair in the yard, people, I mean, you guys talk to each other. Did you ever hear about this?
No.
So for whatever, I can assume that this is probably something that has been stated here, but never tried.
This is the first time I've heard of it.
Would, I understand that you said that these are spy cams. Can you elaborate a little bit more? I mean, what exactly do you feel that these things are there for? Is it like an invasion of privacy that you're afraid of? Is it that you're afraid of that you got Big Brother watching like 1984? What is the difficulty that you have?
So to be clear, I mean, we're not afraid of anything. The job we do speaks for itself. What I can tell you is I don't understand how a camera facing the driver would provide safety to the public. I don't understand that concept.
Okay, has management or the city approached you before this and said, this is where we're going to do, this is what it's going to look like, this is where it's going to be facing? Have they discussed this with you in the last couple of months, weeks?
So I could tell you that we were called to a meeting with the Solid Waste Division in regards to them installing installing in-cab cameras. That's all we know. They didn't provide us any information on anything. All they said is that they were going to do this, which is kind of concerning because, again, we've been showing our willingness to work with the city. So this report has Lloyd's name on it, the general manager from Fleet, but yet I had the meeting with the general manager of Solid Waste. I had the meeting with the Solid Waste Division. I don't understand, if it's a Fleet initiative, why didn't I have this meeting with the general manager from Fleet?
I mean, in looking at page 9 of the 12th business required for telematics, the only vehicles that are getting anything in-cab cameras is the solid waste, nothing else. I mean, everybody else might be getting tracking and GPS and all that stuff, but you're the only guys that are getting this.
Correct, because it's a solid waste initiative, not a Fleet initiative.
A couple of more questions, since I have some more time. Do you know if this was, I mean, has any councillor approached you? Or, I mean, do you know if this has gone through council? Like, I'm new to this, I'm not sure, but I only came here in 2015, beginning. Do you know if this, I mean?
To my understanding, there was no direction by council to do this. This was brought on by the Solid Waste Division. That's all I can tell you. I'm very limited with information. I wasn't made privy to any information, but that they were installing these in-cab cameras.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. We'll take it into committee. Questions of committee members? Councillor Crisanti? No, we're on the deputy. Councillor Crisanti?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So can I just bring your attention to page 8? So, and I heard your deputation. Thank you for coming in. But the staff report says that in-cab camera solution facilitates accident restruction and driver coaching that are based on video recordings of the incident. What can you respond to that item? Is there a particular issue, in your opinion, with excessive accidents, reporting issues, and well, things along that line? What's your comment on that?
Well, I don't believe that there's any issues with accidents. Our CVOR ratings are very good. We're better than any contractor that's out there. So I'm not sure, again, what the motive is for these in-cab cameras. So just so we understand, so you install an in-cab camera, right? So what was said to us is you install an in-cab camera that's facing forward. If one of these solid waste trucks sideswipe a rear view mirror or a mirror on the side of the road, it will not trigger the camera because the truck is too heavy, too big to feel the impact of a mirror. So what would that have prevented? Or caught, for that matter?
So are these cameras, your understanding, are these cameras that are all facing forward, or some of these cameras, will the multiple cameras maybe also facing the interior of the cab?
So to our to what the meeting with the Solid Waste Division, they've explained to us that there would be an in-cab camera facing the driver and one facing forward through the front windshield.
So one facing the driver at all times?
Right, correct.
Okay. And the second part of the staff report on the page 8, on the third last paragraph, the use of in-cab camera solution has resulted in significant reduction in accidents in other organizations. Are you aware of this report and this history on successful in-cab cameras that have resulted in reduced accidents?
I'm not aware. Again, I wasn't made aware of this, but where are the comparisons with the City of Toronto? There's no comparisons here. So, I mean, if I were to give you, okay, well, this municipality had, I don't know, 90 accidents a year. We installed these cameras. They've brought it down to 60. There's no comparisons to the City of Toronto anywhere. So I'm not sure where they're getting those numbers from, or they at least should have provided the numbers to the committee.
We asked some good questions here. I may ask some of them, and I'll ask this one to staff as well. But do you happen to know where this whole concept of camera installation started with? Only with solid waste vehicles?
Do I what? Sorry.
Where did it start from? Where did this originate from? Do you know?
I'm not sure. We don't have it in any of our fleet. Like I said, they referenced that the City of Hamilton has this. None of our vehicles have this. I don't know where this came from. They just called us to a meeting one day and told us that we would be getting in-cab cameras.
And did I hear you say there was a pilot project that, and you were not aware of this pilot project going on?
Correct, and that's in the City of Toronto website. If you go into the solid waste page, could we have, you have the report?
No, that's fine. If it's there, that's right.
It's there.
Yep. All right, that's fine, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Crisanti. Councillor Davis, questions of the deputy?
So what you're saying is that what is included in here is in-cab camera equipment. There's two technologies here. Is that correct? There's multiple technologies in this RFP,
Correct.
but only solid waste
Would be getting the in-cab cameras.
will get in-cab cameras.
Correct.
So on page 19, I think that's what, it's got transportation, solid waste, Toronto Water, engineering, all the way down, and I don't see in-cab cameras on any of the other telematics. When you met, you just said that you met with solid waste staff?
We met with solid waste about a month and a half ago to tell us that they were installing in-cab cameras.
And what did they say was the reason for that?
It's just, they said it had to do with liability. If there were accidents, they can see if our drivers were texting, eating, distracted in some way, some form.
So it was specifically to monitor the behavior
Of the driver.
of the drivers?
And we asked a specific question, would this be only used if the camera was triggered? And they said that they would use it for disciplinary reasons to keep an eye on employees.
They would use it for disciplinary reasons?
Yes.
And, okay. That's all I have to ask.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions of the deputy? Councillor McConnell?
Matthew, we have a Health and Safety Committee here. Has this issue of safety in solid waste, in the vehicles and the drivers of solid waste ever been brought before that committee?
No, I don't believe so.
And, well, I knew you would know the answer. I was asking him, however. So to your knowledge, this has never been an issue in our solid waste department. Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions of the deputy? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions of staff? SI councillors first. Councillor Karygiannis.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to staff. Was there a pilot project that was done? You sort of mentioned that, but we've heard otherwise.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the pilot project that was mentioned in 2014 never went ahead, actually. Part of what's happened here is a consolidation of a number of different telematics contracts into one larger contract, which is now before us as the result of an RFP. So that project was never moved ahead, and there were no cameras, in-cab cameras installed in the vehicle.
So this thing that you got on the city website is misleading.
I haven't seen that on the city website.
Okay, www.toronto.ca/WPS/portal/ I mean, I can go on. 4.2, retrofit of board monitoring / coaching devices. There is a pilot project underway in the collection area of District 4. SWMS will evaluate the results. This pilot commenced in late 2014 and will be completed in 2015. Was this a reality or a fiction of my imagination?
Through you, Mr. Chair, item 4.2 actually comes out of the Ernst & Young Safety Review, where they recommended technology like this to help improve the performance and the safety of our staff and of our residents in the communities that they service. If it says ongoing, that is in fact misleading. The intent was to undertake a pilot, and as the GM of Fleet indicated when...
Right, through the chair, it says this pilot commenced...
Councillor Karygiannis, could you let
I'm just going to read, it doesn't say...
Councillor, could you let the staff finish their answers, please, to your
I don't think the
question?
staff listened to what I said, so I'll read it one more time.
Councillor, so you can let him finish his answer before you come to that conclusion. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, a short answer. There was contemplation of a pilot. The pilot was never completed, and we do not in any way have cameras installed in our vehicles without staff knowing about it.
So I'll reread it one more time. This pilot commenced. It doesn't say will commence. It doesn't say it commenced in late 2014 and will be completed in 2015. That to me tells me it was done. Will I be incorrect in assuming that we never did it?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we probably, it predates my time, we probably initiated the planning as to how we were to go about it, but we never actually completed the field portion of the pilot, which would involve installing the cameras. That was never done.
Was this ever brought to council for approval?
Through you, Mr. Chair, you mean the installing of the in-cab cameras?
Yes.
So this, what is before you today is proceed with the approval of the RFP, which the entire telematics suite includes in-cab cameras and a number of other modules that are available.
Now, my question through the chair to Mr. Potchlock. In order for you to put out an RFP, don't you need some direction of council in order to do this? I mean, or you just go ahead and you know, this is something likely to be done and we go ahead and do it? How does it work? I'm sorry, I might not have enough knowledge.
Through the chair, you know, divisions will, through the budget process, identify their needs with respect to procurements, including telematics in this case, which we've had in place before.
So through the budget process, this will be something that will come to council, correct?
In the terms of requesting funding for the procurement moving forward, yes.
Was it ever brought to council? I might have missed it.
Through the chair, I assume through the budget process, the funding has come through because as part of an award, they have to have funding approval.
Okay, well, you know, Mr. Potchlock, I'm not going to, but there's a lot of assumptions, and certainly, I mean, I'm looking at 4.2, I could be stand corrected on this. Now, what is there a cost-benefit analysis on this?
Through the chair, so that's part of exactly with rolling it out and looking at where the best return on investment is with respect to telematics, as opposed to a shotgun approach of installing it in all vehicles or equipment.
If I was to tell you, like, we heard from the deputy that this is something that is targeting them. I mean, what would you have to say about that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, again, looking at the devices, the telematics device, the in-cab camera, and so forth, based on industry analysis, other public fleets across North America, private fleets across North America, this is typically where the greatest return on investment is. Large trucks, high traffic areas, congestion and so forth. Based on the severity and accidents to date, there's definitely an opportunity.
How many accidents
Thank
have we
you,
had to
Councillor.
date?
Councillor Layton?
Thank you very much. Along that line and accidents, the CVRO rating, our commercial vehicle operating rating, what is it? Not what is the definition of it, but what's the actual rating?
Through the chair, the actual rating as of today is 31.4, and a lower number is better.
And it's a rating on a scale of 100, right?
That's correct, yeah.
How have we performed over time since the last couple of years?
Through you, Mr. Chair, if we went back 4 years ago, to be exact, we were at a conditional rating of 72.5, not very good. And we've done some extensive work with our client divisions. They've worked with their drivers, a lot of manual time and effort to bring down that rating to where it is right now.
How does 31.4 compare to the private sector?
Again, I don't deal with the private sector on a daily basis, but it's a good rating.
So we've done quite well in reducing the number of accidents as well as the performance of operators, right?
Through the chair, that's correct.
Did council have a policy debate about the use of these cameras?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm not aware of that. This is part of a larger telematics suite.
How did it end up that the in-cab cameras made its way into the RFP? Were they in the RFP?
Through the chair, that's correct. So to explain what this, draw a parallel, if you think of telematics as, say, a Microsoft Office suite of services, where you might have Word and Excel and PowerPoint. Telematics, we have in-cab cameras, commercial vehicle operator registration, pre-trip monitoring, vehicle location devices, and sensor-based devices for monitoring whether a vehicle might be plowing, sanding, salting, sweeping, so forth.
So the in-cab cameras are part of a suite?
It's one of an available suite of services that you can look at through telematics.
So did we ask for it?
Through the chair, yes, we did. So
the RFP was put out that included in-cab cameras only for solid waste management?
Through the chair, no. So again, the full suite that I mentioned is available to everyone, and the method for proceeding is based on best initial value. Does it mean that it will be with solid waste only? No, absolutely not. There could be benefits with other divisions going forward, but those need to be assessed on a case-by-case basis.
So are the cameras installed in all the vehicles then with the telematics system?
Through the chair, again, there is nothing installed at this point. This is an RFP award, which would result in a contract, which would then result in us looking at.
But when we award the contract, will all transportation services, solid waste, Toronto Water, engineering, municipal licensing and standards, public library, and fleet services, will all of them be installed with the same onboard camera?
Through the chair, no. It depends on the suite of services that you choose under telematics.
Okay, so what was the cost of adding this to the suite? Because at some point where there's going to be a piece of hardware put in that has some software to back it up, those two things are going to cost some money.
Absolutely. So through the chair, the telematics device itself is $500 installed, $515 to be exact. And the in-cab camera is $800 installed. And to add to that, the return on investment through one collision, if you can avoid one collision, that's paid for itself.
How is the camera going to avoid a collision?
So through the chair, the camera, the basis of what the camera does is it identifies unusual force. So it might identify hard braking, sudden lane changes, excessive speed, or other things such as an actual collision. And there's incidents where, and I'll let the solid waste folks speak to this, where the vehicle might be at the curb and a vehicle pulls in front of them just as they're pulling ahead, and both parties or the solid waste might end up with the fault of an accident because it becomes story related, whereas the camera, what it does when that trigger event occurs is it records 8 seconds before the event, so it's running in a loop up to 4 seconds after the event, and it gives fact-based evidence of what occurred during that time.
So is there any experience of these cameras in other jurisdictions, and is there evidence to suggest that they reduce the number of accidents?
Through the chair, yes, there is, and yes, there is evidence to suggest that they reduce collisions. In the leading fleets in North America, that's exactly what you see, and it can be in the range of up to 60% reduction in accidents. We're saying 35%.
So is there a relation of those to the CVRO, to actual reductions in CVRO, and how would that compare to Toronto's existing CVRO rating?
Through the chair, if I understand the question. So the CVOR is calculated. It's a fairly complex formula based on incidents, severity of incidents, mileage traveled, and so forth. And what this does is it allows us to identify opportunities for improvement. So it's not about discipline. It's about coaching behaviors and opportunities for improvement, identifying where there may be risk. And that unusual force area, things like that are there. It can also be used for things beyond that, such as complaint management. The drivers are able to push the button and record incidents themselves.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Layton. We'll take it into committee now. I saw Councillor Davis first, Councillor McConnell, Councillor Grisanti.
To Mr. Patchlock, is this RFP structured in such a way that we could award it and remove the in-cab cameras from the contract? Putting aside whether or not the division wants that, but technically, in terms of the structure of the contract.
Through the chair, I'll start.
Which side are you going to lean to? Lean over here. Okay.
Through the chair, I'll start, and if the General Manager Fleet has anything to add. The recommendation is for the GM Fleet to negotiate and execute an agreement based on the terms and conditions of the RFP. So in theory, yes, you could negotiate that component depending on how it's separated out. And I'll turn to Lloyd to see if there's any additional.
I'm sorry, could you, so that's in recommendation 2?
No, recommendation 1.
Recommendation 1. So this would, and they are going to negotiate and enter into an agreement. So we could say, amend that with the exclusion of the in-cab cameras is technically possible.
Through the chair, to add to the previous comments, you could do that. The other option is to negotiate the agreement that includes all of those, and based on other things that may happen, such as grievance proceedings or what have you, you would not select the option of the in-cab cameras.
Why would we buy a bunch of things and it sounds like you're anticipating a grievance, if we don't know the outcome of that grievance? Why would we go ahead and purchase anything? Anyway, technically it's possible to say with the exclusion of in-camera or in-cab cameras. All right. Would you be surprised to know at the Occupational Health and Safety Committee, the only thing that has come up that was over and over and over requested over and over again for safety reasons from solid waste were heated adjustable passenger side mirrors, and we refused and refused and refused to put them in. Would you be surprised to hear that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, again, those are specific items that I would have to work through the details on.
Going forward, we will put them in, but not, we have refused to put them in when the drivers themselves have asked for them. Anyway, plowing and salting trucks. I didn't think we were doing any in-house plowing and salting. Does this mean we will require all of this technology to be included in the contracted services? And do they then have to enter into purchasing from under this contract, or how will that work?
Through the chair, I will start, and if the transportation staff have anything to add, I'll let them
And
know.
solid waste, since we have contracted out solid waste. Was this technology required in the contracts we have with solid waste?
Through the chair, so there is some services provided in-house by transportation. The devices also exist on approximately 1,300 contracted units with transportation services, and it identifies when the plow is up or down, when they're salting or when they're sweeping or sanding and so forth. And anything beyond that, the transportation staff can answer if you have questions.
We have contracted out all our snow removal. So I'm asking, will this requirement, is this requirement to have this technology included in the contracted services for snow removal? Let's start there.
Through the chair, there's still approximately 20, I think, salt trucks in the Toronto and East York district in-house that have GPS on them and have had since about 2002. There are no in-cab cameras, though, and no plans to install in-cab cameras. On the contracted side of our winter fleet, approximately 1,300 pieces of contracted equipment will have or have had GPS installed on them. A phased-in approach, but also going back as far as 2002, with no additional plans to install in-cab cameras on those either.
Okay, so it is built into the contracts for contracted services that they must have GPS. Is that what you're saying?
Last question, Councillor.
Well, for solid waste, is that the case for solid waste as well, for contracted services?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm not quite sure about Miller, but GFL, who has two of our largest contracts for solid waste collection, they both have telematics systems in their trucks. That's something we didn't have to spec. That's just an industry practice that most solid waste fleets have now for locational services, all that sort of stuff. They don't have in-cab cameras yet, but certainly that is the direction that most private fleets are moving in now.
So Miller, that was the most recent, oh, okay,
Over your 5.
thank you.
So Councillor Crisanti, questions of staff?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So, how did this issue with respect to cameras find its way into the RFP? I know you just asked that. Doesn't there have to be some process before we go through an RFP process and the expense of going through an RFP? Should there not be some discussion and debate that deals with the various different policies and maybe procedures and justifications, so there's some agreement before we actually go out and get prices for something that we may or may not want? Someone going to answer?
Sorry, through the chair, can you ask the question again? I didn't hear.
Sure. So, this item found its way through the RFP process. How did it do that without any debate that I'm aware of? I don't recall any debate on council, any discussion with respect to this, any feedback from anybody got directly or indirectly impacted by cameras, and any discussion on potential procedures and justification, policies, and how this would work. All that, in my thinking, should take place first before we actually go out to an RFP on anything for that matter. How do we get there?
Through the chair, as mentioned by transportation staff, telematics has actually existed in city vehicles for approximately 15 years. So this is just continuing on with that. It was previously done under about 5 different contracts. Prior to this, we worked on consolidating all of those contracts into one. This is one contract for potentially up to 10 years. So this is continuing on with work that's been in place for the last 15 years.
No, I understand it's continuing on with work, but this is a very specific issue where we are going to be purchasing cameras to install in a specific fleet of vehicles only, not in others. And it only makes sense that we would have extracted this particular one issue and discussed it. There was a report from Ernst & Young, as you indicated, that even spoke to a pilot project, which on one hand, the understanding was that it was complete, but we just found out today there was no pilot project. So there are a number of things that need to happen first. Would you not agree that we should be following a certain procedure before we even request an RFP?
Through the chair, again, with continuing on, with the over time and the advancement of technology and so forth, additional devices, information, technologies become available. The in-cab cameras is just one of a larger suite. I paralleled it to Microsoft Office. It's one of a larger suite of services that are available under telematics. It does not mean you have to select that. It just means that it's available.
Well, I know that there are also other technologies that could do similar things without actually putting cameras in cars. And I know insurance companies use them, and they really monitor driver behavior in terms of sudden stops and sudden accelerations and those things. Were any of these other technologies looked at before this was considered?
Again, through you, Mr. Chair, when we're dealing with, so the in-cab cameras, and as mentioned by some of the previous staff in industry with respect to the greatest benefit for collision avoidance, risk mitigation, and so forth, the in-cab camera, in conjunction with the telematics device, which also does a number of the things that you've talked about that you through insurance companies, that is the full suite of services and more.
What is the total cost of this one program?
So the in-cab camera installed is approximately $800.
Sorry, how much?
$800.
The total. The total, that's per, right? So what is the total cost by the time we start and finish? If it did go through and if we did agree that it's going to happen?
Through you, Mr. Chair, do you mean just the in-cab camera piece?
Well, the camera piece. That's
So the total
question,
cost,
Councillor?
the total cost is $800 installed, and then there is ongoing airtime charges similar to your cell phone or anything else, which are approximately $40 a month.
I still don't know the total cost.
It would depend on how long you use the device for and how many vehicles. So the total projected cost of all of this for a range of vehicles and everything else at this stage is $15 million over 10 years if everything that's projected went that route.
I have to ask the committee.
Do we have second rounds?
Councillor, McConnell.
Yeah, I think I was next, and I know that Councillor Davis asked a fair number, as did the Deputy Mayor, Crisanti. So I think I've now got the number that I was looking for, which was the $15 million over 10 years. So my question is, aside from all those other concerns, would it surprise you that when we put and when we discussed putting in-car cameras for police as well as body cameras, it took several years of discussions, both with the police as well as with the public?
Through the chair, no, that wouldn't surprise me. This isn't my first time doing this. So.
Right. And we've had no conversation really with the unions or with the public on this matter.
Again, through the chair, there was a discussion. One of my staff was at a discussion with the Solid Waste Management Division staff and the union a month and a half ago or so.
That's the one that the Vice President spoke to. The Vice President also suggested that if we really are interested in safety, which hasn't seemed to come to the Safety Committee, Health and Safety Committee, that perhaps what we should do is to make defensive driving available to all members who are driving for solid waste rather than those who have had several accidents. Have you considered that?
Through the chair, so as part of driver's licenses upgrades, so upgrading from a G to a D class and so forth, that defensive driving course is mandatory. So those are things that have typically happened that, like any of us know, over time when you're trained in something, and I myself would know that sometimes you tend to forget. We get into habits, we forget things. This is just a fact-based method to identify opportunities, risk areas, and make data-driven improvements, and it's in line with the City of Toronto's Vision Zero plan, road safety plan.
Right. And can you explain to me why this matter, if it was so important, has not been taken to the Health and Safety Committee?
Again, through the chair, this is part of this. What is before us today is an award of the RFP for the larger suite of telematics services. Could this go through the Health and Safety Committee? Absolutely.
I think I asked why it didn't, because if it was a health and safety issue, which you indicate in your report that the only reason we're doing this is for health and safety reasons, not to monitor whether someone is eating a sandwich or whether or not they're stopping at Dunkin' Donuts. If it's only a safety issue, then why, and it is a safety issue, then why wouldn't it have gone before the committee that looks at that and can respond to it?
Through the chair, I'll accept responsibility for that. The way I've looked at it is as tools to manage the city's asset safety, focusing on the assets and managing, mitigating our risk and so forth. So happy to take it to the Health and Safety Committee, recognizing that, yes, we could have done it sooner, but here we are.
So you were looking at it from an asset management rather than a personnel management?
Through the chair, that's correct. Yes, that's my role.
Thank you. Well.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor McConnell. Other questions from committee members on this item? Sorry, Councillor Davis.
Councillor McConnell
Councillor
has
Croissant.
raised some questions.
You want a second round? Does the committee want a second round?
I was going to ask.
Sorry?
Yes?
All right, so we have to let outside councillors go first. Okay, sorry. And before we go to a second round, I just wanted to ask, so we're looking at inside cameras versus and outside cameras. From a safety perspective, from the reading I've done, that often, so they can't operate separate from each other, that often the companies that are using them from a safety perspective, they need both the inside and the outside cameras. Can we just deal with the outside cameras?
Through the chair, so the in-cab camera, the provider under which it comes from, it is one unit, so it's an internal camera, external camera. And that way, during an event such as a collision event, it occurs what's happening outside the vehicle and inside the vehicle simultaneously. Is it possible to do something with the inside cameras to disable that? Of course, it's possible, but that's the way that they currently are.
Okay, and then in terms of just operating with an outside camera, for instance, there's an unfortunate accident 4 or 5 years ago now, I believe, where a child was killed in southeastern Scarborough. Would an in-cab camera have helped in that investigation? Or, because, you know, if a driver's texting or I don't know what else they could be doing in the cab, not, you know, paying attention, just like when you're driving a car, you go through that investigation. It's done without an inside camera.
So through the chair, again, that incident was before my time with the city. I can't speculate on any incident that might have happened. I can say that factually, based on industry, they do help and they have helped. And it's through data-driven improvements, identifying issues, opportunities for improvement, and coaching. It's not so much about discipline, but about coaching, thinking of a sports team approach of of coaching and improving together is really what it's about.
Okay. And then another question I had about, I guess, all of these contracts, and it has to do with open data. And, you know, we have transportation put in a program about snow plowing using open data to track snow plows, so you can look up online quickly when your snow plow is coming. We've talked about doing that with library bookmobiles, your garbage truck when it's coming, so it's easier for people, customer service-wide. Have we baked in the concept or the use of open data into all of these?
Through the chair, that's absolutely correct. Yes, we have. That's intrinsic in this is the open data concept. The Where's My Snowplow app with transportation, where you can see where the snowplows are, is part of it, and transportation staff are here if you have more.
So it's specific open data and the use of it compatible with the City of Toronto Open Data Portable is specifically outlined in this contract?
And through the chair, yes. And if there is more work that needs to be done, say another division, or there was other functionality or features that may want to be developed, there is provisions for that within the RFP, which will result in the contract.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much. Okay, so we're going to go, will the committee do another round of counts?
Mr. Chair, just in the interest of time, I don't need any more questions.
Okay.
I'm looking at the clock now, realizing how close we are to 12:30. So I don't need any more questions.
Okay, so is the will of the committee, you want to do a second round of questions? No? Oh. Sorry? Well, it's the will, we're not doing in the second round of questions, Councillor. Okay. Speakers on this item. Councillor Karagianis.
Thank you, Chair. On May 17th, 2017, I had a meeting with Jim McKay, Rob Orban, and Lloyd Bridley in my office. I want to thank them for coming, and I had communicated with Mr. McKay before, and he had told me that this was coming up. One of the questions that I've asked of them, and staff was there, and I wanted to confirm this by asking them, was does any other users in our city have in-cab cameras, like the private, the people out in the GFL, and I was told, yes, that they have. Now, staff was present and I took notes, and today we find out that GFL does not have this. I could have misheard, but certainly my hand did not miswrite. We also see today that staff have written on 4.2 that this was done in 2014, 2015. And this is a public document, and now we find out that this wasn't done. Maybe we misunderstood, or maybe we don't know if the glass was half filled or half empty. I've got great concerns about having a camera on me if I'm working. I'm sure that all of us are feeling the same. You certainly don't want a camera on you when you're working. Public figures, they can't have the camera on them. I say to you that until we get more information on how this is going to affect, until the union is spoken to and everybody else agrees to this, that this item, especially the in-cab cameras, be removed from the RFP, and everything else to proceed, and then that once we find out how CVOR or CROV, how they are affecting the vehicles and how we get into accidents, that we have a conversation with experts. We have a conversation with other people that are actually doing the plowing for us, the snow plowing, all kinds of stuff, to see if they're also willing. But I'll tell you a thing, right now as it stands, I think that we don't have all the information. I think we need to remove it, and I think we need to make sure that how that affects the privacy of people. I don't think that we've heard that from the Ombudsman or anybody else. I think we need to hear that, because if we go through this process and then the Ombudsman dives into it and we find out that, whoops, we shouldn't have done this because it's disrespect of privacy or it has privacy issues, then we're going to have to dismount them. We already bought them. We have not asked our accountability officers if this is something that we should be going down. And I have to tell you, privacy is something which is very important to people, be it at work or be it at home, and especially when you're in a cab and you've got 1984 or Big Brother looking up at you, you're going to be
a little bit intimidated. So staff will certainly not appreciate this, and I don't think that we should put our union and the people of men and women that we have out there doing great work, and we find out not only they're doing great work, was also shown that they're able to do the work cheaper than it's done in District 1 or 2. So until we are actually crossed our T's and dot our I's, and especially speak to the Ombudsman and ask her to weigh in on this, how the whole issue of privacy is done, I think that we should remove this from the agenda today, especially when it comes to the in-cab cameras, and we can certainly revisit it, in a couple of years down the line. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Layton to speak.
Thank you very much, and I'll be very brief. I tend to agree with the approach of removing this notion of in-cab cameras from this contract. The locational piece, I think, is very helpful and useful, and sufficiently randomized enough that it's not pointing to particularly at individuals in this case. On a division, like if we saw it across the board, if council made a decision that across the board we were going to pursue this policy, or at least it was important enough that, or had a cost savings enough that we should that we should adopt it as policy across the board, then that's one thing. But for it to appear like this before we had an opportunity to discuss this at council, and in singling out one division, I just think our time is probably better spent focusing on what we can all agree upon around the locations and tracking and some of the other functionality that's in this Microsoft Office suite of technologies for telematics, but that we should remove the in-cab cameras until we have an opportunity to have a more fulsome debate about that in particular approach, and then whether or not it needs to be in all divisions.
Thank you, Councillor Layton. We'll bring it into committee for speakers. Councillor McConnell, and then Councillor Davis.
Councillor Davis has a motion, and so I'll leave that and then speak to what I suspect it is. But, I've got some real problems when what I hear is asset management versus resources for people. And the reason that I have that is that, it's people that drive trucks. It's not trucks that drive trucks. When we were at the police, when I was vice chair and chair of the Police Services Board, we did eventually put in in-car cameras, and we put in body cameras as well, but it was for an entirely different reason. With police, they have a huge amount of interaction with the public, interaction with crime, interaction with danger, interaction that eventually goes to the courts. And so it was very important for us to have that kind of knowledge, both as a protector for the public and a protector for the officer. That's not the case here, and I feel very much like this division is being targeted. We've just finally, I think, begun to have some morale come back, some feeling good about their job coming back. And I don't think that this is going to make them feel better. I think this is going to make them feel a lot worse. And so from my perspective, I would have treaded a lot more carefully on this one. I have no difficulty with the other suites. And I think being used across the board, I have no difficulty. But if, in fact, we are going to have in-cab cameras that are really monitoring, let's be honest, the behavior of the driver, then I think that's a much bigger conversation. And having heard that it was never of issue at the Health and Safety Committee, and so that we don't seem to have any problem with any of our workers around this safety issue, or it hasn't been identified anyway, then I really think that we should go very slow on this. So I'll be supporting any motion that removes this piece from the entire call.
Thank you, Councillor McConnell. Councillor Davis, I saw you next.
So I'd like to move a motion that recommendation 1 be amended to direct the General Manager of Fleet Services to exclude the in-cab camera equipment in negotiating the agreement with BSM Technologies and to reduce the contract value accordingly. I too have concerns about the process that's been used to bring this here. This is a very significant policy. It's a very significant labor management policy. It is because it's being touted as a health and safety issue. It's a health and safety matter. But this did not go to the Employee and Labor Relations Committee for discussion. Everyone across the table should have known that this would be contentious and that we would end up in a battle with our employees over this issue. So I regret that we are debating this technology within an RFP report, a contract report, as opposed to debating this either in an attendance management or in the labor relations context. We haven't heard about this anywhere else. Now, I understand there was some argument or some information that was given today that it was a recommendation of KPMG and that it was in the budget. I don't remember any recommendation from KPMG that said put in-cab cameras. Now, I just saw a report that they made that recommendation. I don't remember seeing that. Maybe there's an efficiency study that's buried somewhere, but we didn't see that. I don't recall it being in a budget document. It certainly wasn't highlighted. If I went back to the analyst notes, maybe I could find it in solid waste analyst notes. I don't know. But there are too small, I hear. Right. The other thing I would point out is we do have a procurement policy that says when there are matters that are controversial or likely to be or have been in the press that council might like to weigh in on, it should come in the before the RFP goes out. So we have an opportunity to weigh in and give some direction from council on a contentious procurement. And I think if we'd had this debate before, we wouldn't be even here today having to deal with it in the context of a contract. I'm not sure if we've looked at, do we have provisions in our collective agreement to allow this? I suspect there hasn't been any negotiations of that. I suspect that the city would argue it was management rights or whatever, and there will be a grievance. Every single bargaining unit that has had surveillance like this has taken these things to grievance. I'm sure there's jurisprudence, but we've not had an opportunity even here. What have the courts said about this? This is a much bigger question. This is about invasion of personal privacy and the extent to which management can do that. And that has not happened in this debate. It's come through a procurement contract. This is not the way to have this discussion. The other thing I'm not certain of is we have a video surveillance policy at the City of Toronto, and Councillor McConnell raised the question of the community, the public. Do we want cameras that go out and surveil our streets? I don't know if that's if we followed the video surveillance policy. It requires that we go through a very detailed analysis and submission to look at whether or not we are violating the personal privacy of constituents. The Toronto Police has its own policy around video surveillance. I don't know if this has gone through that filter before it came here today. I suspect not. So I think this is premature, not well thought out, and potentially, as all the other speakers have said, it's not going to contribute to good staff morale, nor do I believe that it's going to contribute to safety. The question about safety, I think is something that has to be discussed in a different place. The GPS, obviously, that's something that is useful, and nobody is objecting to that. So I hope that we can proceed with this contract and eliminate the provision of the in-cab cameras, which at this point have been identified as just...
Wrap up, Councillor.
Yes, as just for solid waste, but we heard today that they're looking at doing this for all the other fleet. So this is a big policy question that was going to be just slipped through on a procurement that we happen to see on a table, and I don't think that's where the policy debate should have taken place.
Okay, thank
you.
you, Councillor. Any questions of the mover? No, seeing none. So, Councillor Davis? I agree with the intent of what you're trying to move. Would you take it as a friendly amendment if I amended yours to include the further consultation with the union, the Health and Safety Committee, to look at opportunities for cameras, future use of in-cab cameras? Sorry?
That's not friendly.
No? Okay, all right.
I would leave that in management hands to determine how they wish to proceed.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Shan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I won't be moving a new motion. I will be supporting Councillor Davis' motion. I also feel the process isn't very clear to me, and I don't think something as significant as this has had enough consultation and background information on many issues, including labor relations, privacy, and health and safety issues, if that's the primary concern. And I'm not completely convinced if that is the primary concern. So I would like to go back to a process that can have a more comprehensive conversation around this before we move forward on this. So I will be definitely supporting Councillor Davis' motion.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Other speakers? Councillor Crisanti?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so I wholeheartly agree with Councillor Davis. I think that's a good motion. It's a motion that I hope that this committee will adopt unanimously. And so, at the risk of sounding repetitive, there are so many things to discuss. This is a big issue. With respect to policy, it's a big issue with respect to procedures and primarily justification. And we're starting with one particular division and excluding everything west of Yonge Street and, of course, other divisions. I understand there's a discussion about maybe going citywide. So emphasizing, again, the need to take this and move forward and ensure that we do our due diligence and we proceed with caution, given that, you know, we're talking about people's privacy and we're talking about a whole lot of issues here. We've got an excellent safety rating, I believe it was at 31, and improving. And there's maybe other ways to improve safety and put our efforts, for the moment, through these other directions and maybe other technologies that are not so intrusive. So I will be supporting Councillor Davis's motion, and I hope everyone does the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Crisanti. Any other speakers? Seeing none. Sorry, I just have a motion. I wanted to move that clerks are just finishing. Good. Okay. So I'm sorry. I'm going to do this as standalone because Councillor Davis wouldn't take it as a friendly amendment. Okay, so I'm going to move the City Council direct the General Manager of Fleet Services in consultation with the General Manager of Solid Waste Services and other appropriate staff to consult with city unions and the Health and Safety Committees regarding the use of in-camera equipment and report back to the appropriate committee. And I'm going to move this. I understand the intent of Councillor Davis's motion, but I've also, over the last week, I've been doing a lot of reading about in-cab cameras and, you know, and the tie-in between an in-cab camera and the outdoor camera, the outside camera. And in particular, when it comes to solid waste trucks, I understand the perspective of the union that they see this as an intrusion on their work environment in the cab. But I think it's also important from a public safety perspective and looking after our residents that we have for this safety system to work properly, there needs to be an in-cab camera as well as an outside cab camera component, and I need more coffee. So, so that's what I'm moving. The other point that I raised in my questioning around the open data portion or component of this contract, making sure it's within this contract, because as we strive to move forward the city in the 21st century and using modern technology, I think it's very important that we have our options available to us. As I mentioned earlier, there's already an app that's used for snowplows and determining when your snowplow arrives. I think it's just as important we have that opportunity to look at from a public service perspective about when your garbage truck is arriving, bookmobiles in the Toronto Public Library, understanding where the bookmobiles are. So I'll be supporting this amendment to the staff recommendations and go from there. Thank you. Questions? Councillor Crisanti? You take the chair. Councillor Davis has a question to me.
So you argued, Mr. Chair, that you thought that the externally focused cameras were useful. Is that the intent of this?
So the intent of this, so I still think the in-camera, so I'm supportive of the outside camera. I would like to have some more consultation with the union and the health and safety committees about the viability or reliability of the in-cab camera.
Internally focused? What I heard was that there was a possibility of some other technology that was exclusively externally focused.
Internally focused, that's what I mean, yes.
So this is focusing on
The driver,
the driver,
yes.
even though you argued it was for an externally focused safety reason.
Both. So the tie-in to the system is you have an internally focused camera and you have an externally focused camera.
Okay.
Okay. Sorry, Councillor, you're outside the committee. Okay. Sorry, Councillor Crisanti, I think Councillor Shan.
Clarification question. So if this motion passes, if this amendment passes, it's more or less like the council giving directive to start exploring in-cab camera as a technique or as a strategy or as a tool.
So it's looking at an internally in-cab focused camera at the driver in consultation with the unions and the health and safety committee.
So as I understand this.
Viability of it.
So at the end of this council, in-cab camera discussion would be a council-directed discussion if this was to pass here, when we haven't seen the other parts of it.
So this is a consultation with the union, the health and safety committees about the viability of it. They could have the consultation with all the parties involved and decide that not to do the in-camera, the internal camera, but I'd like to have that conversation amongst all the parties.
To explore the option of in-cab camera.
Yep, the viability of it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So we have two motions. Councillor Davis's goes first. All in favor of Councillor Davis's? All recorded? Okay. Recorded. All in favor? Councillor McConnell, Councillor Cole, Councillor Crisanti, Councillor Davis, Councillor Shan, opposed, Councillor Ainsley, and that passes. And then there's my motion. All in favor? Councillor Cole, Councillor Ainsley, opposed? Sorry, I don't know if we need a recorded vote. You want a recorded vote? Yep, okay. Councillor Cole and Councillor Ainsley, opposed. Councillor McConnell, Councillor Crisanti, Councillor Davis, Councillor Shan, and that item loses. All in favor of the report as amended? And that's unanimous. Okay, thank you. Our next item is...
Mr. Chair, if I could, I don't know whether item 13 is ready, if they'd rather wait until after lunch or they prefer to go now, but it looks like most of them are here. So that most of them are here, maybe we could just go ahead with at least that deputation, those deputations.
I'm fine as well. A committee want to... So we have two items left on the agenda. We have item 13 and item 14.
I think we should go with 13.
So I need a motion to extend the agenda.
Yeah.
Councillor McConnell, all in favor? Carried. Oh, we're just going to extend to finish. Yeah. 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 Okay, so we're on item number 13, the Job Quality Progress Report and Considerations for the TBM contract number 47020-391. So we have a list of deputants. The first deputant is Sheila Block, Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives. So just for everybody that's new to this or haven't done this before, so the deputants, each deputant has 5 minutes to address the committee. Each member of the committee has up to 5 minutes to ask the deputant questions. After this, we ask questions of staff, and then we have a debate over the item. So Ms. Block, you have 5 minutes whenever you're ready. There's a microphone in front of you. If you press the yellow button is on, and whenever you're ready.
Am I on here? Yeah, okay, thanks. Thanks very much for this opportunity. I really appreciate this opportunity to talk to city councillors about this really important issue. So in July of 2013, City Council asked staff to develop a job quality index. That was almost 5 years ago. A lot can be accomplished in 5 years. For an example, the Living Wage Network in Ontario has grown from really a handful of communities to 28 over that period. Hamilton's City Council has adopted a living wage, Cambridge City Council has adopted a living wage, as has the school board in Hamilton. We've also seen over those 5 years great strides being made on community benefits agreements, including legislative changes at Queen's Park, research to learn from the experience of other jurisdictions, and the implementation of a community benefits agreement for the Eglinton Crosstown project. And that really is a good example of how to use the power of government spending to do double duty, both to build necessary infrastructure and meet community needs and decrease inequality. Over that 5 years, we've also seen a review of the entire legislative structure around work in Ontario through the Changing Workplace Review. And we've also seen tremendous community, union, and others' involvement to really have a community campaign to really outline and bring to the forefront the importance of decent work, and really how decent work goes beyond just what people are paid, but includes the importance of availability of sick days, and the importance of some advance notice and scheduling. However, in those 5 years, that seems to not have been enough time to actually develop a job quality index. And I want to remind councillors why this index is important. Over the 5 years, Toronto has been once again identified as the child poverty capital of Canada, and as the most unequal city in Canada in terms of the gap between the median incomes and high income earners. The city has developed in response to that the poverty reduction strategy, And in that poverty reduction strategy, there has been a focus on decent work. But in the absence of action, that poverty reduction strategy remains just words on paper. We do know from our research that much of the inequality and poverty in this city is the result of labor market outcomes. And a colleague of ours, John Stapleton, has a really apt description of it, where we are just turning into a giant Downton Abbey, with the wealthy working on Bay Street and in high tech, and then an army of low-paid workers making our lattes and taking care of our children while living in poverty. And I know that there has been progress in the fair wage policy, and that's absolutely to be applauded, but that is really insufficient. The health impacts of low-wage work are well documented, as well as the impact on community engagement and family lives. And these impacts include having to work when you're sick, having a great deal of uncertainty around your children and childcare and elder care scheduling, and the impact of income variability and unpaid wages on family household income. So I really urge councillors to use your power and your responsibility to ensure that before renewing this contract for cleaning services, the following conditions are determined and set out in a job quality index and met. One is paying a living wage, which is $18.52 in the City of Toronto, providing for 7 paid sick days, providing for scheduling certainty with a 2-week schedule, equal pay for equal work, which means regardless whether that work is contracted out, whether they are part-time workers or full-time workers, the same rate of pay. And finally, some measures to ensure that people are paid on time and they aren't waiting months for their paycheck, while of course their landlords will not wait months to have their rent paid. So really, I thank you for this opportunity, and I really urge you to take concrete action, use your power, and ensure that the direction that you and or your colleagues gave 5 years ago is followed up before this contract is completed.
Thank you, Sheila. Any questions for the deputant? Councillor Davis.
I just wanted to go over the list. Living wage of $18.50. What was the second one?
The second one is paid sick days.
Right. Great. And you're likely to hear that because the provincial government is making changes in a variety of legislation, that we shouldn't take action.
Yeah, I was somewhat.
Pardon? Action, and I want, yes, so I'm asking why we should.
Yeah, I was really kind of bemused by that. First of all, we don't know what's going to be in the legislation. Second of all, we don't know when it'll be implemented. Third of all, if the legislation actually winds up providing higher than these minimum standards, then the contractors will be held to those, obviously, those legislated standards. And I think that council moving in this would really signal to the provincial government that there is support for decent work and for poverty reduction measures and for that kind of double efficiency of using your money wisely from the largest government, and other government in Ontario, or as we like to say, the 6th largest government in Canada. So I am bemused by that argument.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Davis. Other questions of the deputant? Seeing none. Thank you very much, Ms. Block.
Thank you.
Next, we have Mr. Tim McGuire, President of the Canadian Union of Public Employees, Local 79. Morning, Mr. McGuire.
Morning.
Ms. Miller. Whenever you're ready.
Again, my name is Tim McGuire. I'm president of QP Local 79, City of Toronto Inside Workers and others. I want to start by playing a video of one of our members who's a cleaner at Union Station. His name is Carlo, and he's worked for the city for 3 years. He is a part-time cleaner, and before he worked for the city, he worked for Impact Cleaning, the company that has a contract to provide cleaning services in the midst of the, what's called, I guess, a mixed service contract.
Yes, 1 second.
Hi, I'm Carlo Aranda. I work with the city. I assigned on Union Station. I'm the afternoon for person on that workplace. It's been 2 years now. Yeah, I work with Impact like 2 years, and then now it's almost 2 years now in city too. So when I work with Impact, like if you're a cleaner, you're just a cleaner, and then when it comes to the payroll, their salary is very low. When it comes to like, you know, job secure, it's not that secure because, you know, we don't have benefits. You know, we just rely on when the payroll comes. And there's no schedule that it says that you're gonna be good here, like it's gonna be permanent or something, so you still have a fear in your inside. Yeah, you're not feel comfort. I'm uncomfortable with that. And then when the city, they provide a lot of trainings. They can send you to these trainings. You can develop yourself, and then the salary is very, you know, fair enough to my situation. I can live right, like I can do things I want. So yeah, it's very nice to be a city employee. So one of the issues is like I have to know the schedule in advance so I can manage my personal life too with my son, since I'm a single father. So it's very important to know my schedule in advance, like, you know, 2 weeks in advance will be great, will help me a lot. The bottom line is, you know, I want to keep my job, like, you know, I don't want to leave. I want City of Toronto keep that workplace. I want City of Toronto maintain the cleaning job there, like we're the frontliner there when it comes to cleanliness, because that is like a major landmark of the city, Union Station. I want city to be proud, right? Like who's maintaining this, who's responsible for this. When they see some good development, they're like city. So, you know, I'm part of the team, so I want to, you know, to grow, and I want success to, you know, to that workplace.
The two things that are, maybe three things that I've learned about the cleaners at Union Station as parallel to other city workers, particularly cleaning, is how proud Carlo and his colleagues at Union Station are of the work they do for the city. Union Station is a gateway to our city, and they are very proud of the work they do and in their relations with shopkeepers and public that goes through that gateway to the city. They're very proud of the work.
Yeah, we're okay for home.
The other thing about Union Station, a little bit of history, and recent history for us, is it used to be the case that Union Station, that the contractor there subcontracted sometimes to undocumented workers who could not be found to have their wages paid to them. And it was the work of this committee or others at City Council, and City Council as a whole, that looked at the issue and wanted to ensure that decent jobs with decent conditions, that the fair wage was raised, and other aspects of cleaning, because we know what that industry is like unless we put measures in place to watch. And as you saw from Carlo, the city can still do better. He does not yet know 2 weeks in advance of his schedule so that he can plan his life with his son, what his schedule looks like. The city has to step up to the plate and do better, and one of the ways it can do that is to actually adopt standards like the ones outlined earlier, paid sick days, fair scheduling, equal pay for equal work, a living wage. The work is already done. Adopt it, like other jurisdictions are, and getting paid on time. We also recommend two other things: proper monitoring and enforcement of our standards. What's in the report is not sufficient. What's in this report talks about a vague, decent standard, decent jobs, and a vague monitoring process. We need decent standards to go with those decent jobs. Inequality is the issue of our time. The City of Toronto should be a leader lead, not wait for the provincial politics to determine what the standards will be in this province.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Maguire. Questions of the deputant? Seeing none, thank you very much. Our next speaker is Dina Ladd, coordinator of the Workers' Action Center. Not here. Mr. Andrew Cash, co-founder of the Urban Worker Project. Good afternoon, Mr. Cash. Nice to see you again.
Well, today, more and more workers are in non-standard employment. That is, they are not in conventional employee-employer relationships. We're good now? I'll just start. Today, more and more workers are in non-standard employment. That is, they're not in conventional employer-employee relationships, and therefore are currently outside Ontario's labor laws and standards as they're currently written. This has led to increasing precarity for those struggling to find stable full-time work, and it's leading to a new class of workers without any of the standard benefits of regular employment, including things like the right to be paid on time, the right to a safe work environment, not to mention access to income security measures, health and dental benefits, sick pay, or a pension. There's virtually no protection from abuse of labor laws and standards. Heck, you can't even be sure of a regular work schedule from week to week. And how do you plan your life? Well, that's the new reality of work. Indeed, too many workers are just a bike accident away from the financial abyss. This reality is creating unstable homes and communities and has a negative effect on children and on the mental and physical health of workers, and on the economy as a whole. More and more workers who are connecting to the Urban Worker Project are bringing stories of contract non-payment, wage theft, misclassification, no benefits, and when they do get paid, it can be below minimum wage, a minimum wage that is itself completely inadequate for any worker living in this city. We hear stories of workers working on contract for a company and getting paid much less than others doing the exact same work who are their full-time permanent employees. Now, while it's true the provincial government has undertaken a sweeping review of Ontario's labor laws and standards and is signaling that it will act upon the report's final recommendations soon, no one knows what of the hundreds of recommendations it will act upon, how comprehensive this action will be, or when new rules will kick in. And, I'm not a cynic, but we all know governments at all levels commission reports all the time that gather dust with recommendations not acted upon. But regardless of what happens at the provincial level, and I really do hope that the government will implement the report's recommendations because there's a lot that's good in it. But there are many, including myself, who feel that the recommendations don't go far enough in shoring up the instability in too many workers' lives or laying firm planks in the building of a stronger floor for all workers. It isn't enough anymore to simply count the number of full-time and part-time jobs created in the economy, whether it's at the city, provincial, or federal level. We also need to better measure the quality of these jobs. This is so vital. Does this job come with benefits, a pension, sick pay, health and safety protections? Does this employer have a solid record of adhering to a robust, decent work framework? Does this employer pay its contract workers on time? These are all questions we need answers to, and so I'm here before you urging you to move forward on a job quality assessment tool. We know the broad parameters of what is now on the table at the provincial level, and we're looking forward to action there. But that shouldn't preclude the city from acting now. You have an incredible opportunity to be a leader, to meaningfully confront the changing nature of work now. Workers need model employers to raise the bar on standards today. With this kind of leadership at the city, the bar for all employers will be raised in both the private and public sectors right across the city. And as your progress report notes, and I'm just going to quote it here, no other city in Canada is currently promoting a decent work agenda. However, other cities are interested in learning from Toronto's experience. So, by moving forward now on a job quality assessment tool, the City of Toronto can have a positive impact on work standards far beyond the boundaries of the city. Indeed, action like this by the city could even impact provincial changes in the future. As the city becomes less and less affordable for low and middle-income Torontonians, the response to the changing nature of work is crucial to the future livability and viability of our city. If regular workers and their families, young people, can't afford to live and work in the city they were born in or the city they've immigrated to, if so many are a bike accident away from a financial crisis, then many will just be forced to move. We don't want that. That is not the city we all love, care about, work hard for, and believe in. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Cash. Questions of the deputant? Councillor Layton?
Thank you very much. And just really quickly, there didn't seem to be much in the report about the contracted work, like individuals that are contracted. Rather, they look to companies hiring individuals. Are there any other or any recommendations you think could be included in order to address these, like individual contractors?
Well, one of the things we're seeing more and more is the issue of contract non-payment and subcontracted contracts, where, as was stated earlier, where you know, for a variety of reasons, the money is not paid, and further to that, there's virtually no recourse for someone working on contract when non-payment or when not adequate payment is made. So I think one of the recommendations has been to make clear to employers that they need to make the payment within 30 days of a contract. And we're hearing contractors waiting 60, 120 days. Sometimes they just simply don't get paid.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Councillor Davis, questions of the deputant?
Thank you. One of the things that I've seen increasing prevalence of in my community, in particular for the newcomer community in my ward, is the use of agencies.
Temp agencies.
Temp agencies.
Mm-hmm.
So what used to be, what did it used to be called? The one big one that was primarily secretaries, Kelly Girls. It used to be called Kelly Girls, actually.
Mm-hmm.
It's now called Kelly Services, and there are many others. Do you see much prevalence of those agencies? And are there any particular and specific ways that we should be looking at regulating or the provincial government intervening in those, with those agencies?
Absolutely. For workers engaged in the temp agency cycle, it's a situation that's increasingly difficult, where they're simply unclear on the worker's side who the employer is.
Yes.
And therefore, you can't enforce the rules that are out there right now, that are on the books right now at the provincial level. I think that we need significant tightening of those rules. It's incredibly frustrating for workers in that situation, and not to mention the fact that the actual hourly rate that's paid for the work that they do, they see a fraction
of what they
of what
the
is actually being paid for that work, and that's just simply wrong.
Right. So are there specific recommendations that have come from this report that you're aware of?
Vis-a-vis
Changing Workplace Review report?
Well, it's a huge report, so you've got me on the spot there. But what many of those deputing today will say is minimum standards that we need to see in work in general pertain to all workers, whether you're working for a temp agency or not.
What I found interesting, and I'm sure you won't find surprising, is that one of the largest employers is part of a global company, and they have a contract that they must use, and they have an exclusivity contract with Kelly Services that they must use to hire everyone except management. And they hire them through services so that they are no longer employees. So are we seeing this right across North America and around?
Well, we're seeing it everywhere, and we're also seeing it among public sector employers too, at all levels of government. And this is why this is so important today, this conversation around what's the city's response and reaction to the changing nature of work. Is the city going to be a leader in building a new framework that supports all workers, or are we going to miss that opportunity? And I would argue today that the recommendation that the city wait to see what the province puts on the table, well, we know that that could take quite some time, and none of it's clear. But what's clear is what we have before us today and what's possible for council to act upon today.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions of the deputant? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Cash.
Thank you.
Always nice to see another Neil McNeil grad in the room.
Thank you. You too.
Next, we have Nazir Ahmed.
Hello to the councillors here today, and I want to start just by saying thank you for allowing me this time to speak and allowing me this platform to speak my mind today. So let me just start by saying my name is Nasser Ahmed. I'm a 24-year-old Pakistani Canadian, and I'm a freelance media producer currently living and working in the city of Toronto. A little bit about myself, son of two Pakistani refugees to Canada. I grew up in extreme poverty. I've been working my entire life to get myself out of that, to lift myself out of that situation. And I'm finding that it's increasingly ever harder to do this when, even though I've been working tirelessly for the last 5 or 6 years of my life, I can't assure myself anything past a 6-month contract. And this is not to say I'm working in small locations. I've worked on huge projects, things like the Rio Olympics, the Toronto Pan Am Games. I've worked for institutions in this country like Hockey Night in Canada, and I still can't afford any level of security in these places. And ultimately, that's why I'm here today. Now, I understand that this today specifically, we're talking about city contract workers, but that's why I brought up my own personal story. That's because you guys today have a very unique opportunity here to be an example, to set an example not only for other municipalities and provinces across the country, but for private sector employers as well across this country. You know, a lot of people on the right tend to love this expression of, you know, a rising tide lifts all boats. But why can't we apply that to labor standards? Why can't we apply that and be an example to other employers and show people that actually giving workers actual rights and giving them a standard, you know, rate of living will actually improve their lives and improve the lives of those employers as well? You know, that's why I'm here advocating specifically for equal pay for equal work, a living wage that's tied to inflation, getting paid on time, and actual security, because we all know that for young workers and a lot of older workers as well, we're all just a stone's throw away from being back in poverty. So I'll keep it short and I'll wrap up by saying that, you know, if we don't stand up for the rights of city workers today, what message are you sending to my generation and my cohorts in the future who struggle to find gainful employment? So please, councillors, please help my generation by helping these city workers. Thank you.
Any questions of the deputant? No. Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate you coming in this afternoon.
Thank you very much.
Next, I have Suzanne Gallant. Not here. Okay. Ariel Lewis. Nope. Okay. Pietro Camilleri. Afternoon, Mr. Camilleri. You have 5 minutes whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon, all. I first of all want to thank the Government Management Committee for the opportunity to depute today. Typically, I consider myself an articulate individual, but as of late, I've been feeling somewhat demoralized. I earn a livelihood as an editor and a proofreader, and for the first time in my 14-year career, I have actually seriously considered whether I have to transition to a new career. And as someone who's turning 53 this year, I find that prospect very, very daunting. The reality is that how urban workers in the city of Toronto find work nowadays and how urban workers find work are very, very different. The landscape has changed dramatically. I work primarily as a freelancer. A true freelancer procures his or her own clients. But I've also had to augment my income. I am a temporary worker sometimes. Sometimes I am a contract worker on a payroll. This past winter, I was a subcontractor. So what I thought I'd do is I'd illustrate with 3 examples of how someone in my position struggles to try to find work and to earn work. In 2015, I had a good year financially. I was working through the auspices of a staffing agency. I didn't have 35 hours a week every week, but I earned $40,000 that year in gross income. The staffing agency would have earned $71,000. That is, some staffing agencies mark up what a temporary worker earns by up to 67% in a city like Toronto. Initially, my hours of work were quite regular, but then all of a sudden 35 hours of work after a few months became 30 hours of work, and then 25, and then 15. And then toward the end, I was averaging 2.5 hours of work. And when you're averaging only that little work a week, of course, a client will ask whether you can work home remotely, because if you go in for half a day, you have to be paid for a minimum of 4 hours. It's impossible to find other work with other staffing agencies if you don't know from week to week when your client wants you in on which days. I mentioned before that I have to augment my income because I can't always earn it through my freelance clients. In the last 10 years, I have been a scorer for the Ontario Secondary School Literacy Test. I think many of you know that every year 150,000 students in the province of Ontario write a test, and you need scorers to score these tests. Councillor Davis had mentioned Kelly Services. I think many in this room are familiar with the Drake Staffing Agency. So in the last 10 years, I've taken on this work in the month of April, anywhere from 3 to 9 days. And I've met people who've been doing this since the late 90s. In the late 90s, the rate of pay was $150 a day, and hot lunch was included. This year, my rate of pay was $150 a day. That gives you an idea of that the compensation hasn't been commensurate with the cost of living and other factors, for example. I was fortunate. I finished work after 9 days on August the 16th. I got paid on May the 19th. I had to wait only 36 days. There are people, however, who worked only 3 days, and they had to wait up to 6 weeks in order to be paid. My last example involves the precariousness of being someone to whom work is subcontracted. Last winter, I was fortunate in that I had a 13-week contract position at one of the largest telecommunications companies in Canada. I was hired by a business entity that subcontracted the work to me. Little did I know that the subcontractor's company, in turn, was subcontracted by an advertising agency, and then finally this ad agency invoiced the telecommunications firm. I could only invoice at an hourly rate of $30 an hour, which is well below what many freelance editors and proofreaders have to charge in order to make a decent income annually. The subcontractor would have invoiced the advertising agency $50 an hour, and the ad agency in turn would have invoiced the telecommunications company $70 an hour. That is a 133% markup of what I was earning per hour. As the deputant before me mentioned, if the City of Toronto, as a public sector employer and an employer that awards many contracts, can be a shining example to the citizens of Toronto, I believe that private sector employers will indeed take note of the Government Management Committee and the City of Toronto adopting some very, very much needed recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Camilleri. Any questions of the deputant? No? Okay. Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate you coming in today. And our last registered deputant is Sean Mayer.
Thank you very much. I'll be very brief. My name is Sean Maher. I work at the Social Planning Council, and we do evidence-based policy analysis and public policy reform work. And that requires us at times to come forward and provide critical advice to the city on public policy. So it's nice to be coming here today to tell the city that we think you're absolutely right about a whole bunch of things that in a lot of cases that we were wrong about. The first of those is about the initial steps in this process. Not that long ago, we were advocating quite vociferously that we needed a living wage at the City of Toronto. And instead, Council came back and said, actually, a living wage is a bit short-sighted. It's not a comprehensive analysis of what the challenges are. What we need is a job quality assessment tool that thinks coherently about security and stability and working conditions. It was a moment of impressive insight for Council, and Council was exactly right about that. Council is also right that the Changing Workplace Review changes some of the context for this work. That's a place where Council was right again. And the Council's right about another thing, and the Mayor's been talking about that a lot over the last few weeks, which is that sometimes the things that we're counting on the province for don't necessarily arrive when expected. That sometimes putting all our eggs in the province of Ontario's baskets does not turn out terribly well for the folks here in the City of Toronto. So it makes a lot of sense to, while we wait for the province to move forward on the Changing Workplace Review and the very thoughtful recommendations that are in it, to continue to move forward as an employer at the City of Toronto. The ideas recommended by the other deputants today around sick days, around work predictability, around fair scheduling, around living wages, are all things the city can move forward with as the province moves forward on their work. And I encourage the committee not to figuratively cross your fingers and hope that Ontario government comes through, but instead to take this opportunity to move forward so that we can deliver for working people and aren't leaving the fate of working people in the City of Toronto to the munificence of Queen's Park. Thank you very much.
Sorry, Sean. Any questions of the deputant? No? Okay. Thank you very much for waiting this afternoon. Okay. We'll now take it into committee. There's no visiting councillors. Questions of staff? Councillor McConnell, then Councillor Davis.
So I have, first of all, questions on the assessment tool and why it isn't ready today. So can you explain to us, first of all, why some of the deputants said it's been in the works for 5 years, but my understanding is it's really, was only started really in the fall when you're given direction. Secondly, why would you wait for the announcement from the province, and what is the timing of you coming back with the actual assessment tool?
Through the chair, the report before you today was only ever intended as an update report on the work. We were not in a position to be delivering a final product to this particular committee meeting date under any circumstance. So the plan is always that we will come forward in the fall. Given the work at the province and the timing of the provincial government providing a response, we felt that it was relevant to inform our advice to council with respect to the tool. What I would clarify for committee members and deputants is there is absolutely a commitment on the part of staff to deliver this tool by the end of the year.
And in fact, it's in the work plan, is it not, for the poverty reduction?
That's correct, and we will align the reporting out when we provide the annual poverty reduction update.
And there was a list of things that were pretty well brought forward by all of the deputants: sick days, fair share, scheduling, living wage, equal pay, and getting paid on time. Are those things that if we referred those to you, you would be able to consider those? Well, I'm assuming you were considering them anyway, but that would be highlighted in terms of the reporting back?
Absolutely. They're consistent with the decent work framework, the 5 domains on page 5 of the report. We're happy to have those referred back to us, and we will be sure that we address them in the final report.
And as part of your report, my understanding of your report is that it's also going to be a plan for implementation. Is that not correct? And so requiring the resources to monitor that, but also to make sure that there's a penalty system in place if in fact people don't measure up to that.
So one of the elements of policy approach that we're working through now is whether or not it's a carrot or stick approach, and there are pros and cons. So we are working that through with our colleagues. The other important piece of work that we have to get to is broader consultations with the labor sector, with the employment sector, with the nonprofit service provider sector before we finalize our advice to committee and council.
And we have a social procurement policy that looks in particular at equity-seeking groups. Would your report or plan also include that as an important component of any framework that we were moving forward, or any assessment tool?
I'm hopeful that we will have a fairly good analysis of the impact on equity-seeking groups. By definition, I would expect that the tool will have a more significant impact for equity-seeking populations than others.
So I've sort of outlined what I think, Mr. Chair, is going to be your motion, and I'd like you to put it first before we debate it, because I think it's really important. And if all of those component parts were in, you would support the direction that the committee would be heading in. Is that correct?
Sorry, with respect to the motion?
Yes, which you haven't seen, but which...
So not having it in front of me, but seeing the chair nodding, yes, I think
yes, I think so.
be in
And
support.
then my last question, thank you, is to Josie. Josie, there have been, there's what we're deciding today is yet another year of the impact procurement contract. We don't have the tool ready. I believe that you have looked at some of aspects of what the tool would be. In terms of any of the additional things like paid sick days, fair scheduling, are any of those, equal wage, getting paid on time, are those embedded in this contract?
Last question, Councillor.
It is, yes.
Yes, through the chair, my understanding is that those are embedded.
All of them?
I would have to confirm all, but in principle, yes.
Yes, okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. I think we're, Councillor Davis.
Sort of two line of questions. One of them is contracts and whether or not we have a list of all of the work and the job classes that have been contracted out over the last few years that are being delivered through contracted services. Is there like a summary anywhere? Numbers of jobs and the contracts, maybe who the contractors are.
Through the chair, no, I don't believe we'd have a centralized list of that. We'd have to work on amalgamating that together.
So we don't know how many contracted jobs there are.
If I can, my understanding is that the decisions to contract out work to third parties are typically made on a division, at the divisional level. There are certain collective agreement obligations that need to be met as part of that process. It may be possible to amalgamate, as Michael suggested, a list of those incidents where that work has been contracted out, but I don't believe that a list exists at present.
Because each budget that I've been here, there have been more jobs contracted out. And I think it would be very useful to understand the scope of our own contracting out. They're all supposed to be governed by the fair wage policy, but there may be other policies that will emerge out of this that we would want to understand the scope of. So is that a piece of work that could be included in the work that SDFA is doing without
We will do our
having
best
to move a separate motion?
to include that in the Q4 report.
I know that when you contract out, you don't know necessarily how many jobs there are. But I know in the solid waste contract, it's very specific about how many employees would be on the trucks, how many trucks, all of that was in that contract. So I'm just trying to get a sense of the scope of contracted work at the City of Toronto. If you could include that, that would be helpful. So the number of contracts, the job classes and the types of work. I think we've contracted out more technical work. I think we've contracted out other work. The other thing I wanted to understand is if we were to have a quality jobs, living wage, fair wage policy that we are going to apply to outside contractors, have we looked at the impact if those same conditions were applied to employees at the City of Toronto?
Any policy frame that staff would be providing to this committee and council, we would have, I can assure you, we will have done our due diligence to understand the implications of that policy frame on the city itself.
Okay, because equal work, equal pay for equal work between part-time and full-time, there may be issues that we have in recreation or other places.
We are undertaking the work in cooperation with colleagues in city legal, purchasing, all of the affected corporate functions. The report, when it comes forward, will have all of that view incorporated into it.
Okay. Thirdly, on contracted or on temp agencies, is there some way that we might be able to build into contracts, and I don't even know what the impact would be, it might actually not even be doable, but is there a way to find out, one, whether the city is using temp agencies in any of the work it does or in any of the work it contracts?
Through the chair, we could definitely determine whether the city directly is using any temp agencies. Through contracts, that will be more difficult. We'll have to work with the Fair Wage Office to see if we can determine it. But it would go to the question of how they're subcontracting the employees and for that job. It wouldn't necessarily be easily determined in the contracts. Not across the board, not every contract is requesting a list of subcontractors going down the line.
And could we consider a policy around that? Because I know that using these temporary agencies temporary agencies are horrible employers, and because they're not employers. They avoid all of these basic benefits and workplace conditions around hours of work, scheduling, and all of that. This is a bit of a speech. I will speak to that when I get to that. But I noticed that in the document, that is the report, the Changing Workplaces Review, it is recommending that any employee that works for a company through an agency shall be considered an employee of the company that is using a temp agency. So that's something I would like to understand, whether we can also look at building into contracts a requirement like that, that either they don't use temporary or agencies, or whether we could address temp agencies in some way, because they're terrible.
So it is a complicated issue. I understand from the statement that the minister issued on the same day that the final report from the Changing Workplace project was released, that the province's intent is to issue its formal response to the recommendations in that report within the week. It was issued 6 days ago, which means it's due tomorrow. So we may know sooner rather than later what the province's intention is in relation to issues like this one. From the city's perspective, as a party who contracts for the provision of services, there would be limits to what the city, there would be challenges in terms of the kind of contractual provision that the city might impose without stepping into the shoes of being the actual employer itself. And there may be reasons why the city wants to maintain, as far as it is concerned, its own distance between the contractors with whom we contract and the individuals that they employ, but it is certainly something.
Councillor, you asked your
Our
last
fair
question.
wage policy.
Councillor, you asked your last question. You're at
It's something we can look at.
Thank you.
Councillor Sham.
I have just a very quick question. With respect to this review and the recommendations, did we have a comparison of what already exists within our contracted service? So there was a question about how many of our work, how many employees are there through contracted services that city is engaging. And this is part of the work that's related to job quality of those individuals, I'm assuming. So have you looked at the current situation in like an environmental scan type of thing or not?
Through the chair, there wasn't a specific look at that. This came out of when custodial services was contracted out, and that's a primary driver behind looking at this, although not the only type of service to be examined. But as we look to develop the framework for the policy, we'll have to look to see how it could apply in more than just the custodial services section. It would be across how it would apply to any contract the city puts out.
Okay, so a particular section of the contracted employees were looked at, but not the entire spectrum in terms of looking at current status. So we heard the 2 weeks notice, for example, from one particular contracted out service, but is there other contracted out services that have similar concerns, or have you looked at any of those things as a general?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we did look at public policy internationally and locally by way of understanding what's happening with the decent work agenda. So some of those issues are part of that international review.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Speakers? Yep, sorry, I'll speak first. Where are my glasses? I have a motion that I'm going to move in 7 parts. 7 parts, I believe. So I'm going to put it on the screen. The Chief Corp, do I have to read this whole thing? Sorry, so I'm putting my motion on the screen that I'm moving. It's in 7 parts. It covers paid sick days, fair scheduling, equal pay for equal full-time work, a living wage, getting paid on time, a plan and required resources for monitoring and enforcing these new standards in city contracts, and also plans, programs, or policies needed to ensure fair and equitable hiring practices are being employed by contractors. I'm moving this in for many different reasons. First and foremost, as a city councillor from Eastern Toronto and Scarborough, my ward has 4 neighbourhood improvement areas within its boundaries, if not adjacent to it. Part of the concerns that I have is that many people that I deal with and live in my ward are not only working 1 part-time job, they're working 2 part-time jobs to try and make ends meet. And, you know, they deal with almost all the issues that I've outlined in this motion. And I think as the City of Toronto, the largest city in Canada in the 21st century, our municipal government should be leading by example and should be at the forefront in dealing with these issues. As one of the deputants said, and I've raised before, and I don't really understand why when people are working on a 2-week schedule or getting paid every 2 weeks or not longer, that they cannot understand it as a basic level of employment, trying to make their ends meet, trying to deal with family circumstances, trying to raise children, that they don't know when they're working on a 2-week basis. I think that's very important just as a quality of life when it comes to fair scheduling, equal pay for equal work. I could speak all day about that. Paid sick days is another very important component of trying to make ends meet. More often than not, especially in a non-unionized environment, I hear about people that, they go to work sick. They go to work sick because they're worried if they don't show up and do their shift, that they're going to be fired. A living wage, I don't think we can expect families to people to try and make ends meet when they're working below the poverty line. So, all of these things taken as one, I think are very important. We as a municipal government need to be leading the way and not following others by example. So I hope everybody can support this motion. Thank you. Questions?
Staff has just talked to me in the back. Their concern is that they thought it was Q4, but it appears that you've got a date of September the 25th. And I wondered, they're saying that they can't do...
Sorry, which one? Sorry, Councillor McCollum. Mr. Rossini was giving me advice at the same time.
Sorry. The September 25th date is a time that the staff say they cannot get it done by, and I don't want to go back through this again.
Yep, neither do I.
Would you be...
I'm open to friendly amendments.
Yes, so I'd suggest we just put Q4, and then that we obviously want this before the poverty reduction or around the poverty reduction big report, and that we want it to be implemented
I'm fine with
into
that.
the budget. Okay.
I'm good with that. So we're going to amend September 25th to 4th quarter.
Yep.
Okay. Councillor Davis has questions of me? Oh, okay, just to speak. Councillor Davis to speak. Okay.
I am not going to move a motion about providing a summary of the contracted work and the number of positions or equivalent full-time positions that have been contracted out. But I would, because I saw heads nodding that work could be included in the report, so I'm not going to move it. But I think I'll support this recommendation, but I am concerned about the City of Toronto as being one of the I'm concerned about the City of Toronto being one of the contributors to precarious work. we continue to use, and I have another motion that's going to the Employee and Labor Relations Committee whenever it meets, but it talks to the number of temporary employees and contract employees that we have in the City of Toronto. And it seems to me almost every time we see jobs added, they're temps, and people are not getting permanent work at the City of Toronto. I'm also concerned that we may have situations where we are not paying a living wage and we are not paying equal pay for equal work between full-time and part-time jobs. But primarily, I'm concerned about us contracting out. We can't talk on one hand about being a good employer and at the same time contributing to contracting out, contributing to precarious work. And I really do want to understand, do we use or support temp agencies? To me, the temp agency market has expanded and expanded and expanded. And to the point that most newcomers who are challenged, and this has been the experience in my ward, to find any work, to get any experience in the Canadian labour market, are signing on, being asked to sign exclusivity agreements with one company over another. And I do want to thank the deputants, I don't know if they're still here, who were sharing their personal experiences of employment in this kind of market. But it is inhumane, the kind of conditions that people are being expected to work in these days. So you sign on to Kelly Services, and Kelly Services says you can't work for the competitor, but we'll give you, 6 hours notice that you're going to come in and work 3 hours on Saturday to pack boxes at, the local cookie factory. And there is no predictability to it. The other thing that's frightening is that that same particular cookie factory has an exclusive agreement across North America to use Kelly Services to do all of their employment and hiring, and they no longer have an HR department that deals with hiring, only senior management. So all the people that come into that factory now, anything below management is hired through Kelly. And they are hiring people who are not employees of anybody. No benefits, no predictability, and somehow people are expected to earn a living. So if there's any way we can find out more about how, if we use any kind of temp agencies, and whether our contractors use temporary agencies, and if they do, how we might in some way affect the use of those agencies. We do apply to subcontractors the same provisions for the fair wage policy. If our fair wage policy can apply the same conditions as subcontractors, then there has to be some way we can apply similar conditions to subcontractors of other kinds of conditions like this. So with that, thank you very much. I'll be supporting the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. I saw Councillor Shan and then Councillor McConnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm supportive of the motion as well, but I also want to kind of get a sense of the extent of contracted out work as a whole, as a city, the number of positions, the type of work, the kind of the scales around the wages and so on. The key piece in your motion, Mr. Chair, I agree with this, the monitoring and the enforcing part of it. If we can get a fair sense of how widely we are underperforming in some of the things in your motion right now, it'll be hard for us to kind of feel the kind of work that's necessary to bring it up to standard. So I don't know how many of our contracted services currently only give 2 days of sick days or no days of sick days. We don't know how many of them are more than 30 days in terms of implementing things. So these are minimum things. I mean, I wouldn't be able to wait 30 days, even with my pay, to run the family. So, these are some minimum standards that we are putting forward, not ambitious in any form. So I think it would be better to get a sense of how currently the fact that we've been contracting out so many positions have created or contributed, if we did, to the precarious nature and to get a sense of that. So I'm actually supportive of the motion, and hopefully when we get the report in Q4, we would also have a sense of what the contracting out situation currently looks like in those parameters as well, and what the extent of monitoring and enforcement would be necessary. If we have a lot of problems, then we would probably need to put enough resources into that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shan. Councillor McConnell?
Now, I will be brief. I think that this is the right direction to be going in. I am very regretful that we don't have this in place in order to look at the impact contract, which, as you know, I had a lot of difficulty with. But on the other hand, it does give us some opportunity to make sure that some of these things are embedded, as has been described. And I'm sure we will be doing that before this goes to council. On the other hand, I would say that I want this report to be good, as was the accessibility fair, good and implementable, and as was the social procurement good and implementable. It's all very well to have something that that is completed and you can tick off on our list of requirements for this year for the poverty reduction. You'll remember that that's about 94 items. But I do want to make sure that each one of those items is not just a dusty report, but rather is a real move forward as the poverty reduction strategy requires, because this is about systemic change. And that's the most important piece of this. It's not the amount of money we throw at it, it's about how we do our business and how we change the way we do our business. And those are two examples of where I think we'll make significant change. There are many other examples. But this, you know, you'll remember my 5 fingers. This is the most important piece in the thumb or whatever that we call employment and wage security and income security. And that has been really a target for us this year. I was not surprised that it wasn't ready because it's very, very complicated. But I am pleased, and it wasn't, I understand that it should have been worked on for 5 years, but there wasn't a direction to do that, and that was said last November when we decided to attach these two things together in order to get it done. And staff have been working very hard on this, and so I want to give them enough time to finish it so that at the end of the day, the decent work agenda can move forward. I think we're all looking at that. And I think that we've had too many times that we've had to listen to poor custodial staff who always are the target of our underbelly of contracting out. So, you know, I think that this is well supported by council, but we have to have a report that is doable, implementable, has targets, and also has the buy-in of our divisions so that they actually deliver. So to me, I don't mind taking the time. I would say that it's important during that period of time that there would be a broader consultation once we're close, and perhaps even before we get close, to hear from people as to, you know, the sorts of things that should be in it. And I encourage staff to continue their discussions internally to make sure that once this is put in place, all divisions, all general managers understand what their requirements are. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. So that's it. Councillor Crescent, did you want to speak? No, you're good? Okay. So we have my motion on the board. All in favor? That's unanimous. And then we have, sorry, our last item was number 14, which Councillor Cole held, which was the Union Station Revitalization Project. And he's left. Would somebody like to move the recommendations?
There really is one.
Okay.
Did we not extend this same contract just a couple of months ago?
No, this is different.
Okay.
Sorry, sorry, Ms. Theoli. Somebody like to just clarify for Councillor Davis,
Maybe it was
please?
just the same company that was on another contract.
So we're, through, go ahead.
Go ahead, Richard.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we extended the value of the Bonfield contract some months ago to its current value, and that reflected a transfer of scope from Phase 1 under Carillion that was unfinished to the Phase 2 contract. So it's a net-net.
No, it was a legal contract.
It's
It
a
was
new
another
contract.
item.
Yeah,
Through you, Madam Chair.
it's a whole different
I
contract.
was just going to say, we extended the contract for our legal firm.
Right.
A few reports ago, did that.
Some reports,
For different,
Councillor McConnell, you're sorry, moving the recommendation? I'll move the recommendations in the report. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor Shan, you have a confirming bill for us. Good try, Councillor Crisanti.
It's on the screen.
Can't get it that quick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That the Government Management Committee pass and declare as a bylaw a confirmatory bill to confirm the legislative proceedings of the Government Management Committee acting under delegated authority at meeting 21 on May 29, 2017.
Thank you, Councillor Shan. Any questions of the mover? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried. Councillor Crisanti, do you have something to say now?
I'll move adjournment.
Motion to adjourn? Carried.
guys, record vote? We've always been doing that.
A confirming bill at committee?
Oh, with this committee, you have to.